Adam wasn't playing air guitar. He was dancing in New Hampshire, so it's been a few years.
I don't know if there's a more beautiful spot than here, just looking at it. I think we should hold it facing back.
Right, exactly.
That should be the direction. It's in like July up here.
Yeah.
I know I am. I want to thank MeASBO School of Technology. Sherry Moody is the host here. It's a beautiful facility. I know Joanne is trying to really utilize technology schools, food programs, culinary programs, and really expand across the state. So thank you, Joanne, for really exploring different avenues. Just terrific. Just as a reminder, we'll remind you later in the meeting, April 6th, if I didn't get that wrong, is the final meeting in person for the year in Bangor. So please put that date on your calendar. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, I unfortunately will not. So that meeting will be led by, I think, Joanne will be part of it. That is also the annual meeting, though. So that is a meeting that is important for members to come to elect the board for the next year. I unfortunately had a prearranged to be somewhere else. So I apologize for that, but I'm unfortunately not canceling my trip. So that is your opportunity, though. Saying that's your opportunity for Colin. If you don't want Colin as president, that's your opportunity right there. But please put that date on your calendar and keep that in mind. I do want to thank our vendor sponsors today. I want to thank the Vivo Bus, Gorham Savings Bank and Gorham Leasing, R.H.R. Smith, who's here and will also be doing a presentation, and our breakfast sponsors, Competitive Energy Solutions. So thank you for being our sponsor. And they will have their spotlight here in a few minutes. So I want to thank all of those folks, because if I don't, I'm going to forget. Can we just go around and do introductions this morning, and we'll start with Sherry, and we'll just thank you for being part of this organization and for being here today. I do want to say that for all meetings, please make sure you try to pre-register with Joanne. It's really important for us to get numbers, especially for food counts and for seating and those types of logistics. So I know things come up, I know things happen in the office and you just can't make it, even if you registered. But even if you just communicate, send a short email, say, hey, sorry, I pre-registered, I can't make it. That's really helpful to us. So the more that you can do that, I know that's a change. Couple of things, just in my report before we get into approval of minutes and committee reports. Give us feedback. This has been a great year and a great first year for Joanne. I'm very proud as members and what she's done for the organization and bring us forward. If you feel that we're doing well, let us know. If you feel that we're not doing well or there are things that need to be improved, let us know. We don't know the path forward as a board without you telling us. We're going to talk about PD today. Joanne has put a lot of time and effort into PD, so I really want to see where we're at with that as we wrap up this year. Live PD, as well as the remote sessions that we've had. And what are you looking for moving forward? So to that end, I want to thank Joanne. For those of you who don't know, Joanne Allen is the executive director for our organization. She's the contact. You can reach out to board members, you can reach out to me. Day-to-day questions, and you have things that you want to share, please share them with her. That feedback is critically important. She'll do a little bit in her presentation, but I want to thank Joanne. She took herself and the officers and the board had and said, this is where we want to go. Can you take us there? And she just grabbed it and with it. So hopefully we're moving in the direction you want us to move forward. If not, let us know. And let us know what direction you want us to move forward in. It's all of our organization. It's not the board's organization. It's all of ours, all of our members. As far as membership, we are not going to increase dues for next year, so if in your planning of your budgets, we will not have a dues increase next year. What I am going to ask, and I thank you and all the support staff coming to meetings, it's really important, is really consider for your district, instead of doing an individual membership, doing a district membership. I feel that the bang for the buck or the amount of dues is worth it. If you don't believe that, let us know. But we really need to gauge where we're moving forward fiscally and how we're going to manage the budget, just like we are in our own districts right now. And we're going to be doing a lot more office topics, whether it's remote or in person, that are going to benefit our entire business offices. So please consider that as you're building your budget, as you're thinking about the rest of this year, and more specifically next year, of really increasing, if you're at an individual level, what benefit am I going to get as a business manager, as a district, from moving from a district membership for my staff. All school districts that may not be worth it, we understand that. But for those who have staffed business offices beyond yourself, please really take that into consideration. I'm going to plug Tri-State for a little bit. I wore the shirt on purpose. It is a Tri-State shirt for those of us on committee with Tri-State that we wear for like 3 years. Yes, we have more than one. We don't wear the same one. But Tri-State brochures are over there. It is in Portland this year. I would ask you to strongly consider that, and we'll talk about that under the Tri-State report. Were you modeling that? Were you like Vanner? Okay, but it's a spotlight. So I'll talk about that in a second. What I do want to say about Tri-State, there are scholarships available through MeASBO for 2 $500 scholarships. Joanne will be sending something out to the entire membership for that and how those are selected. It's very sophisticated. We put names in the hat and pull to them. Dave Holden Award is an annual award to the business manager in ASBO who exceeds expectations and goes above and beyond the award in MeASBO. So Joanne's going to be sending something out on that as well. Please consider filling out that nomination, submitting it when it comes out. The name of previous award winners of Dave Holden is on the website. It's really an honor to get a Dave Holden Award. And the names of the people who've been in our industry and supported MeASBO to get to where we are today. Please look at that, take a look, and just reflect for a moment. Those are the folks who built the foundation to get to where we are today. And think about who is that individual within our membership who really exceeds those expectations to move MeASBO forward. So please consider that as well. Talked about the annual meeting. Joanne will talk about PD, and I talked about dues. So I think that's where I go quiet. Anybody have any comments, suggestions, or items before we get into some of the business items and committee reports? They're all shy. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Don. Is there any? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. The treasurer's report was provided with the agenda and being mailed out. You can see the beginning balance back on first. You can see the deposits and the withdrawals as of January 31st. Is there a motion to approve the treasurer's report? Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? And Donna, I saw your facial expression. Just keep holding 1 second. This is where we're really looking at the budget for next year. It will come forward to you before the end of the year. It's just like a school year, July to June. But this is part and parcel as we're talking about the treasurer's report. We're going to be really focused on vendor relationships in the coming year, and we're going to be really focused. That's from a financial standpoint. But we're focusing on those two groups specifically as well, because the path forward when Joanne talks about PD is going to be a much more inclusive PD. It's not just business manager oriented as we move forward in time. So that's why I plugged that as much as I did. It was for both financial purposes as well as for just PD growth. Committee reports, legislative, I think Zach and Sharon, you the two who are leading this one. I do want to say before they start, thank you for folks who stepped up on committees. I'll be very blunt and honest. The past couple of years, just emotionally about the engagement of the membership. Struggle, we were trying to have committee reports without committee members. I gotta tell you, having Joanne on board has really promoted the connection between MeASBO and the membership to bring people into the committee. So if you're thinking about a committee, reach out to Joanne. But I do want to thank all of those who stepped forward from the bottom of my heart, because it's really moved our organization forward to be able to have full committees really doing committee work, just like you do in your own school districts. So I really want to thank you all. And for those who have an interest, it's not a lot of time. Reach out to Joanne and we'll see where your talents and your desires are best fit within the organization structure. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, to all of you.
First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to MeASBO School Technology. This place is near and dear to me, of course. And a shout out to Christy, our student who is taking pictures for us today. She's in our design technology program. I'm going to mention the first bill that I've been monitoring closely, the FMLA bill. I'm sure that it's of great interest to everybody. They're in the rulemaking process. I've been watching, I'm sure you all, a lot of you have been watching as well, where this is headed. I'm sure we're going to have a full update at our April board meeting, so stay tuned for that. The CDS bill is of great interest to everybody for serving our 3 to 5 year olds. That I think looks like it's going to happen. I don't see any way that it isn't going to happen, but we'll know more again at our next meeting. Joanne and I were talking about the support staff wage increases earlier. That also looks like it's going to happen for the 25-26 budget. And that basically puts, I think our ed tech's at 125% of minimum.
They moved it to
150
150 now.
Anyways, I guess I'm in a state of denial right now. So that will be further discussed as well. We're going to have a full report legislatively in April, and hopefully we'll have better information since committees are currently meeting and there's hearings almost daily in Augusta. The nice thing is you can always log in after the fact and watch a committee hearing and see what's going on in that committee and not have to do it in real time. And Zach has some things to talk about as well.
Yeah, the only one outside of that I'm looking at is a transportation bill that has many items. And like item number 27 on that bill would allow public schools to use the multifunction school activity bus without having a special endorsement on their license. And so far, it looks like it's passing through. If any of you deal with private schools, you'll see them drive those kind of white vans up that will hold 14 kids. Hard time finding CDL drivers and endorsed drivers. It's a way to take some of the load off some of the trips and things like that.
That's it for us.
Other questions for Zach and Sherry? Are you all excited about FML and the increase in wages and all of the other things that the legislature seems to be putting on us in our own districts? Joanne's background is very deep and legislative, obviously, from her prior role. She's done a stellar job in trying to keep us all updated in the newsletter and otherwise on when hearings are, when you can join in, when you can listen to the recordings. Please get involved as much as you can. It does make sense. I know in our area we're talking to our legislators on all of these bills because I think there's a misunderstanding of what is communicated sometimes at the legislative level and what is happening, as I call it, in our districts in the trenches. And I think a lot of times there's a disconnect between those two. Well, what's the fiscal impact of that? Well, if it goes into the formula, well, everyone's going to get 55% of that. I think if you see it, they're going to tell you something, a whole different story than that. I think if you're mid-level receiver, you're going to get a different story than that. So be involved. We're trying our best, and Joanne is doing a great job. Please be engaged as much as you can. There's a lot on the table that in the next year or two is really going to affect all of our budgets, and pretty significantly. And we're already seeing it with FML, right? Seeing the threads. What are you budgeting? What are you budgeting? Are you budgeting 1%? Group payroll people for July and August. I can tell you what impact it has on my budget right now. It's $170,000 for half a year for just my district. And I know superintendents are engaged at the MSSA level of getting data to the legislature for that fiscal note as well, as are we. So please be engaged and please, to the extent you can, respond to those because it does make an impact, especially as we're getting into fiscal note time on like CDS and some of those others. Tri-State, Hollis had to step out for a minute. I've already pledged Tri-State. I think there's brochures. The dates are May 22nd to the 24th at the Holiday Inn by the Bay in Portland. Take a brochure, look through. Registration is open. Really network with your folks. I find the seminars good, but I really find the benefit sometimes of having dinner or lunch or breakfast and talking to people and, hey, what are you doing with your budget? Don and I were just doing that this morning before you guys came. How are you posting your budget and what details are you giving your finance committee? That's not ever going to be in a seminar. That's why we get together in person, to have those conversations that we wouldn't otherwise be able to have. And that's what Tri-State really gives you the ability, or affords you the ability to do. Plus you get to meet a great amount of vendors and do the bingo card and see if you win anything. Any questions on legislative or Tri-State? The scholarship for Tri-State. Joanne, you doing Katie? Who's the volunteer? Who are you giving this to? I'm excited to hear this. I want to hear this.
Yeah, I don't do it that way.
Okay. You just pick them?
I silently suggest they should do that. I want to follow up just a couple of things on legislative. The Paid Family Medical Leave Act is a done deal, as we all know. In June, the Department of Labor team that's new to that law, that they just got stood up last month, basically. They're gonna do a webinar for us, and I think it's June 4th. I probably put it in the newsletter, but you'll see it again and again from me. So at that one, it won't be so much of a listening session like the other ones that they've been doing, where this should be more informational and give you all a chance to say something and be heard and maybe get some answers. So since that's June, we should know a lot more by then how that's gonna roll out. The other bills that are excitable, the CDS bill is going back into work session next week. I expect that will be in work session Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There seems to be, that I would say is going to go, it's just what it looks like out the other end. I'm hoping for our April meeting to find some business managers who are already doing that work to come and sort of do a roundtable and talk to us about it. I know one of them will be, I don't know, out in the ocean somewhere or some silliness. But
That's me.
there are some others that are doing this work already, so it might be a good chance to sort of warm up with them to that and what to expect. The other bill, the support staff and ed tech wage increase, hasn't hit the floor of the House or the Senate yet. So here's your chance to talk to your legislators. Things can happen on the floor. There can be floor amendments. Just because it's passed out of committee doesn't mean it's a done deal. So talk to your legislators. If you need to know who they are, or if you don't know which one might be more receptive to a conversation, shoot me an email and I'll help you out on that and let you know who to talk to. So just some things to keep in mind, because I have had some folks reach out to me and say, well, it's passed out of committee, it's done. No, it's not done. So
CDS still requires a fiscal note.
CDS, right. So if something has a fiscal note, that means it could pass the House and Senate, and then it's going to hit the appropriations table. And appropriations has got to figure out what they're going to do with all that. So, there's still time. Those are always good folks to talk to, too. I had hoped I'd get us a legislator for our April meeting, but even though session is supposed to end around the 17th, they've been asked to hold their calendars until early May. So that tells me session isn't going to end when it's supposed to. Big surprise. So, but maybe in the fall we can get someone. They'll be running for re-elections.
So on the fiscal notes, just so you know, the fiscal notes are important because anything that requires funding from the state requires a fiscal note, and that has to go through Appropriations Committee. So when we're talking about CDS, if you have concerns about 3- and 4-year-olds coming into your district, space, all those other items that a legislator or someone at the legislative level and committee may not have thought about, and that impact to you has a fiscal responsibility to you. It's important that you and your superintendent are advocating for your district and for all districts about what that cost is going to be, so that the Appropriations Committee is really understanding what the cost is to implement this. I'm not saying to be for or against it. I'm just saying be reasonable and realistic about the cost that your district's going to incur by bringing on this responsibility. An Appropriations Committee needs to understand that from each of our districts.
Can I make a note on that?
Yeah.
And just because you have an empty classroom does not mean it will meet the needs of a pre-K age group.
Correct.
There are different rules about how close the bathrooms have to be and different things like that. So even though you may have empty space, it might not be appropriate space.
Right, and there's been a lot of discussion in the committee about setting aside funds, the renovation fund, some monies for those retrofits, but I don't know how much, we don't know how much it's going to be or how that's going to work, and be competitive, whatever. So just a lot of moving parts now. I'm not sure it doesn't help anyone feel confident. So let me think, what do I want to talk about? So I guess we'll talk about professional development. So I've got been working with our 6-member committee. They're very, very active. We meet monthly. They've got some great ideas. We did the survey back in the fall that I'm sure most of you filled out. We are trying to program our meetings to that survey. Overwhelmingly, the #1 topic was anything to do with finance. not just, 279s, but anything to do with finance, payroll, HR, all of those business fiscal functions. So that's what I'll be looking at next year. If anyone has a suggestion for presenters, anyone has a contact at the IRS, that would be super helpful. I miss Bob Westhoven so much, and that shows how long I've been
I
doing
was just
this.
talking about him.
Still talk about it. So, yeah, so those are some things that we will be looking at. Got some other things up our sleeves too, so hopefully it'll be a good year. What we're looking at doing is basically having something 10 out of 12 months. We'll take July and August off because I'm told that folks seem to be busy with closing out their year and their audits, and they might want a vacation. So I think we'll just take July and August off, and then we'll start, if we don't start with an in-person meeting in September, we'll start with some webinar, so, our Lunch and Learn series. So one thing the committee has done is we talked about the regional groups. You've heard me mention that for a couple of meetings now. What we'd like to do is in each superintendent region is stand up a regional leader who would hold meetings as needed, or just even, lunch, brunch, pizza party, whatever, to either have presentations or share ideas, share problems, brainstorm, etc. So we came up with a little list based on, we had a meeting with my counterpart in New Hampshire, Chuck Bates, and New Hampshire has a pretty robust regional program because geographically they're a lot like Maine. They have some, towns, schools out in, northern parts of the state. So they do some remote stuff. Chuck attends some of the meetings as executive director. I would certainly help regional leaders, programming or whatever they needed. I could attend some virtually if folks wanted. But we made a little list of what would be roles and responsibilities, and I'll just whip through it right now, but I send it out to anyone who might be interested in being a regional team leader, and if no one volunteers, don't worry, I'll pick people. So what we would think about what regional leaders would do is to sort of make a consistent schedule of meetings. Like I said, it doesn't have to be formal, but just so that you all know that, hey, we're gonna come together once a month or every other month, and just do whatever we feel is needed. You communicate that to the members in your region, and I have a list of members by region for whoever wants to be a team leader. You coordinate your schedule, your topics, those sorts of things, be like a mini-me. I would like a report out for this meeting. When we meet quarterly in person, I'd like the region leaders to either send a report that I could present, or they could come and report out themselves. That would be great, just so that we all know what's going on in different parts of the state, what the hot topics are, maybe something that we need to program at a bigger level. I can create, I've reactivated the listserv for us, so if you're not getting those emails, let me know, because I'm using that. It's a little bit more user-friendly than the form. So I'm using that to get stuff out really quickly, like if a work session comes up or something like that. I'm using that to push. But I can create a forum for each regional group so that you'd have like your own sort of space to talk that we could share with other members, or you just have your own space. So that's something that we could do, where you could share information, put your meeting schedule out, those sorts of things. I could probably, now that I'm talking about it, we could probably do something on the website too, if you wanted, like a little region tab or something. So we could figure that out. Just keep lines of communication open with our professional development committee, like I said, so that if you have topics that are coming up repeatedly or are very challenging, we can make sure to program to them. So let me know if you're interested, if this sounds interesting to you. I can send you this little list. This is just a draft. You can look at it. You can add and delete things, give me feedback. We can have a Zoom call if you want to talk about it more in depth. But I'd like to get the region stood up for next fiscal year. So we look at September and see if we could get something going on that. Because I think we obviously don't get everywhere, every year in the state, so I think that would be really helpful to some folks out there. We could do some sort of regional approach like that. And New Hampshire loved it, so they seem to be right on board with that, and I could even hook you up with some of those folks if you wanted to be a team leader and talk to some of those folks and see how they do it. So that's something we can do. What else? Our sleeves. Jen, Mark, Shelley, what am I missing?
Certification?
Yeah, I was gonna say, that homework that we have.
Certification?
Oh yeah, I did give you homework. How's that going? So part of the survey was certification. As you know, we have a certification program. It's pretty self-directed. In the past, there's been some conversation about formal certification at the state level. Did you even want a certification program? So we asked those questions in our survey, and the majority of the response was, yes, keep the program, make it, keep it voluntary, self-directed, kind of what we're doing. So what I've asked the PD committee to do is look at that curriculum that's out there right now and look at how the program is structured. So for example, do we want to keep 3 levels? Are there things in the curriculum that are no longer, maybe not relevant, but there's certainly things that need to be added? When this curriculum was created, we didn't have as much cybersecurity fraud, those sorts of problems as we have now. So there's some things that probably need to be added to that curriculum. So for the next 3 months, we're going to have work sessions where we're going to go through that and make some updates, and then we'll put it out there. So for any of you that are going through the certification right now, just stay in touch with me and I'll let you know how it's going. Certainly, if you've taken something that we decide is going to be pulled out of the program, we can probably slot the credit in for another item. So don't worry too much about that. So hopefully, again, at the start of the next year, when we talk in September, we will have an update on that curriculum in the program. So, certification. Learns, I think, are going well. January was CTE school funding. Last month was Angel Scotland Bank about data security. Those are all up on the website. Information, handouts, Zoom recordings. End of this month will be Scott Brown talking about the major capital improvement program. So if anyone's thinking about or in the process of filling out an application, you're going to want to jump on that one. He's hosting office hours once a month, but this will be a nice chance to just be business managers, superintendents, etc., talking to Scott. So that'll be a good opportunity. We meet in person in April. June will be our paid family medical leave. April meeting will be a more robust legislative presentation. We're going to meet as a committee and talk about that once we see what's moving through committees and out the other side. The sausage gets made. And Dave Bridgham, who's doing facility work out in the field for Scott Brown's team, will come and talk to us. Many of you will remember David when he was a business manager. So he's going to come and talk to us about that work, what he's been doing, why it's important, etc. And then I'm going to work on something for CES. I got a few other things up my sleeve. So April's kind of a surprise at this point. Did I miss any other? Okay. So I think we're good on that front.
You don't need your capital projects, so that's good. Again, PD items, just like so just communicate with them, whether it's PD or whether it's from the board and the organization level. Board has the annual retreat. It's really exciting. It's a full day that we sit down and go through everything for about 6 hours for the upcoming year. Things that you want us to be considering now to mid-Memorial Day is the time to be sharing that information with us, because in June we will sit down and we outline what the next 12 months looks like. So that's kind of your opportunity at that point. You close the business part. Questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas from anybody? We've done the talking. Sure, turn now. Was it a late night last night? Or a long commute today? Or a long move? It was a long move. Okay. With that, we're going to close the business part of the meeting. I'm going to introduce Lauren and Charlie Solutions. They're going to talk about their program, and we want to thank them very much for being the breakfast sponsor for today's meeting. As I've said, our vendor relationships are really important to us, and I want to thank everybody who's come today. There's other vendors who are in the audience as well. Please mingle during breaks, during lunch. Really reach out if you have questions or just want to know more information from share that. And I'll turn it over to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone to our hosts. I don't know who you are, but this building is beautiful. So thanks for having us here. And our company, Competitive Energy Services, we're based in Portland. We're a Maine-based, privately owned company. And of working for our clients in and around best practices for energy, electricity primarily, natural gas, heating oil, propane, basically any fuel that you buy, we help our customers procure that from a market strategy perspective and a competitive bidding process. Be something folks that work out of our office in Portland, and we work for a range of clients, but have a lot in the higher education space. Maine is our primary home state. We have over 800 clients across the country, but most of them here in Maine. We're from the largest industrial customers, paper mills, wood and pulp and paper, down to the small mom and pop shops, University of Maine. We have a state of Maine, a contract with the state of Maine, so it makes it very easy for folks to work with us. Here to share best practices, information. We have a lot of clients in MeASBO across all the tri-state area. Billing, which has been kind of a confusing, complicated, and interesting topic.
Charlie, good morning everyone. I'm Lauren. I work as an energy advisor at CES. As Charlie mentioned, we're going to be talking today about the net energy billing program here in Maine. And for those of you that don't know what the net energy billing program is here in Maine, the net energy billing program basically allows electricity customers like yourselves to receive a financial benefit from subscribing to qualified renewable projects. So this program can be really beneficial for electricity customers. Mistakes and things to look out for that we see. And just starting to kind of looking at the savings and how savings work under this program. I like this slide here to show the relationship between the project, which is sometimes referred to as the utility, and then the host. So the host in this case would be like yourselves. So really this process starts between an agreement with the host and the project. So under the general energy rules, the host will enter an agreement with the project for like a certain amount of output each month. Once the project's actually up and running and starts producing electricity, electricity generated that month to the utility, and then the utility provider from there basically takes that generation information and applies it to your bill as a credit. And this is for an overall like reduction to your utility bill. From there, so like the host or the electricity user would then be obligated to pay back the developer for a certain percentage of those credits that was agreed upon during contracting. And just looking at an example of how this works for savings-wise, let's say a project produced 1 million kilowatt hours in a month, and that 1 kilowatt hour was worth 20 cents on your utility bill. So that would mean that 200,000 would be applied to your utility bill that month. And then the host would owe back the developer at a 10% discount. We're using 10% not to see here. The host would owe the developer back 180,000 for the credits they received on the bill for a net savings. As you can see from this example, the program really can result in a lot of savings for customers. But there are some things to look out for, as I mentioned, working with clients under the net energy billing program. We have seen that there's some common mistakes and misconceptions, so I want to go over that too with you all. So the first mistake we really see is just waiting to participate in the program. So here in Maine, the interconnection costs associated with developing solar are really expensive. And there's changing regulations around the size of projects that can be built and what qualifies under the net energy billing program. So space is limited, and waiting to participate could prevent you from taking advantage of an opportunity to savings. The other mistake or something to look out for, obviously, is surrounding renewable energy certificates, called renewable energy credits, or RECs. But a REC is essentially generated from renewable energy projects, and they can be used to offset your carbon, or you can sell them back to the market for an additional revenue stream. And RECs are separate from the credits that we just went over on the last. And so they're often overlooked during the contracting process. But these renewable energy and just to put that in like perspective for you guys, like a REC being generated might be selling at like $3 per REC. So they're very valuable for RECs being produced here in Maine. It's definitely worthwhile if any of you guys are looking into this program and getting involved to ask the developer, who takes ownership of these RECs and negotiating that as part of your contract if possible. So certainly something to look out for because it can be an additional revenue stream. And lastly, really the most common mistake we see is the mistake of over-purchasing. So it's very possible to purchase more generation from the project than you actually have in electricity usage. And so when the host or electricity user is oversubscribed to a project, what will start to happen is that excess credits will be applied to your utility bill. And they'll fall into like this banked credit category. And those banked credits expire after 12 months. And when someone is oversubscribed to a project, the credits will consistently fall into the banked category and eventually expire after 12 months. And so unfortunately, when you're oversubscribed to a project and you start to expire credits, you're no longer optimizing savings. So it's really important before subscribing to a project to understand how much do you actually use in electricity and how much. And I'm going to pass it back to Charlie to talk about some regulatory changes.
I want to ask who in here has participated in energy billing or is aware of that. And it's really functionally the same program at home, same type of voodoo that you get from one of these subscriber companies like Nexamp, or they might package it as a community solar program. All of that is all part of the energy billing program and functions the same way, where you're getting credits applied on your CMP bill and then owe something back to the developer. So it looks like a good number of you, and there are still some limited project opportunities out there. But a lot of these projects have faced challenges of legislative changes, so if you're not hearing from those that you contracted with, you might want to check in with them and figure out if their projects are still viable. there have been some headwinds in the program as the Public Utilities Commission, the Public Advocate, and the legislature have come out and opposed further expansion of this program because the financial savings that the participants have come to realize are turning into a cost for the overall. So this isn't like a net positive result. The costs are being socialized across the utility rate base and have been projected to cost hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 20 years. So there's been a lot of objection to that. So limiting the to qualify has been an objective of these policy changes. But there are still opportunities out there. You just need to do your diligence in figuring out if they do have viability. A cliff date of December 31st, 2024, where if one of these projects is not operational by that date, it will not qualify for the energy billing program. So a lot of the rubber is going to kind of hit the road at the end of this year if these projects aren't fully constructed and operational, and they're over a certain size threshold. I should say there is anything that's under a megawatt in scale. A megawatt might be roughly a 4-acre solar project, so it's still pretty sizable. Anything that's up to a megawatt this year can still qualify in the energy billing program. But if it's not constructed by the end of the year, it will not qualify. But you just need to pay attention to some of these details. For smaller projects, 1 megawatt or less. And there are also still good opportunities to develop solar. I saw the photo of for anyone that has open space, there can be chances to develop your own projects that viable opportunities for folks in the future. Compensation under the energy billing program is enough where these projects can provide positive cash flow. Also relatively new, I'm sure you're hearing about this, but solar is qualified for the technology to receive a federal investment tax credit. And under the new Inflation Reduction Act, an entity like yourselves without federal tax liability can actually receive a direct payment from the IRS for that, for percent of the project value. Reduction Act. So you can actually monetize some of the tax benefits now under that new legislation for this type of technology. So, with the group, we appreciate the chance to do that.
Thank you all.
Thank you both. Any questions for Lauren or Charlie?
Be available to us. I just loved one of those slides because we're having such a hard time explaining how the credits work for our board and having that type of.
So the question was, can the PowerPoint be shared? Yeah, if you could share it with Joanne. Joanne can then get it out and make sure everyone has access to it, if that's all right with you guys. Any other? We're going to take 15 minutes break, and then our HR Smith will do their presentation, So get some food, mingle a little bit, and we'll start in about 15 minutes. Or at least we know the trouble we're going to get in ahead of time, and then we can figure out what our exit plan is. I don't know, you choose for your own history. But thank you for coming. Appreciate your expertise, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
improve the state of government right now, especially in finance. We're seeing a lot of,
You hold that
Oh,
chest.
sorry.
There you
There.
go.
Sorry,
Awesome.
yeah, I'm very projecting my voice. Sorry. So Nick works with our partners to sort of help, right now we're trying to come up with some initiatives to help improve the state of any ideas or anything to help get people more interested in local government or school finance, please talk to Nick. Share your ideas and share those with others. Collectively, the four of us have 60 years of experience in auditing, governmental accounting, management, and or school finance. And currently, we perform governmental audits between the states of Rockland and see what you guys are doing a lot. We have a lot of tips and tricks for you to help get ready for your audit. Briefly, what we're going to cover today, we have a section on the financial statement audit, and we also going to do a section on the client audits. Get it in the end. We're going to try to go through this quickly because we have a lot of information to cover, but the slides will be available at go through the audit flow quickly, just sort of what to expect, and show our checklists, and then we'll have those than maybe other auditors have. But the requests are the same, just the format and the layout. It's not one of our clients, it's still a helpful resource for you. We're also going to talk about the common audit issues that we see, and then I'm going to let Holly, who used to sit in your chair very recently, help you guys with tips and tricks on how to, combat some of these common audit issues, things that you can be thinking about term and the long term to changes or new processes so you guys can feel good about getting ready for your audit. Specific reconciliations is the biggest issue, but we will go over a couple other audit considerations and then do Tyler take over, and he's going to talk about federal compliance or your single audit, and we're going to use the same format where he's going to talk about some of the common issues that we see, and then Holly's going to talk about the ways to shoot that. I don't know if you recommend that you do. We're going to talk about SQL preparation, because that's one of the basics. And we're going to talk about the questionnaires that we send out, maybe not every audit firm is using those, but we have some questionnaires that we use to gather information. And then talk about some specific compliance environment considerations or areas where we see the biggest challenges for our clients, and then just some brief other considerations before we wrap up. Start, when we do an audit, not required called a pre-audit, and this is where you come to your office. Perfect for May, maybe even June if your audit's not till later in the fall, and do a lot of planning focus work. So we send 1 to 2 people, maybe more depending on the size of the client. And we either do this in person or remote, and it really is up to you guys to let us know what it is that your preference is. Communicate with your audit manager what you prefer. If you like the remote setting because you're not there bothering you all day, distracting your staff, and you want to just send us stuff and upload it, and you have. So whatever you prefer, we can arrange for that. I think most other auditing firms. At this point in the game, it's not exactly where we're at yet, so we're not looking at numbers. Heavy focus on our planning procedures that we have to do for the audit. That includes documenting conversations that we have with you guys, just talking about how your year's going, what's changed, what's new, any turnover, processes like that. We're going to read the board minutes that you've documented through the year so far, just for any financially significant items that we can ask you about, we've read. We're going to look at your budget probably at this point in time, but be in place, and you've been operating on that for the year so far, make sure it's posted right, things like that. And we're also process that we do, we look at beginning balances that we carry over the entire year and make sure we're audit so that we all know we're starting with these in place. We have a lot of documentation that we're required to fill out by our profession, checklists, policies, things that help us dot our I's and cross our T's. We're going to be doing a lot of that
process, even though we might only be on site for a day or two working with you, there's more work going on. Document what, we learn from you, help us plan our audit, we're going to be looking at, we do an questionnaire, or we might have a competition for your processes, we do use that and the answer to go through risks and processes that you have to see the best way that we can design our audit testing, so that conversation and that questionnaire that we sent out is very important. Yes, I apologize if you need help filling it out. Your audit manager is always going to walk through it with you. We do a lot of preliminary analytical work at this time, but we're really focusing on identifying risk areas and focus our audit testing on those risk areas. And so at this point in the game, we're really planning for to year end, you guys give us your reconciled trial balances and where we need to grab them. We don't know where we want to focus our efforts, so we're trying to plan that. And we might also have you guys pull some information for us. Then, so that when we come back to do your audit at year end, or after year end. So in order to ensure an efficient pre-audit, the thing to do is if we send you a checklist of just making sure that you provide everything that we request on time. And if there's a reason why we can't have it available to us, the days that we schedule for you, it's okay to reach out and say so and let us know that you need to reschedule. It's actually better for us and it's better for you as well. Because you know that you're not ready. And get to your place and move you guys back, and then we can give you more of our information at the time when we're rescheduled. We have 2 days scheduled to work on your audit, and we don't have anything for you, and we don't know to reschedule you, and then we have to go and do your audit work on top of other clients that are scheduled nights and weekends. It's a little so communication is really key to preparing for an audit for us, just letting us know everything that's going on with you guys. I'll always talk to you guys about key items on our pre-audit checklist, which is audit checklist because we've done it separately.
So you can see that the first item is highlighted. I would really like to hit on that. I guess I can't emphasize enough how helpful it is for us to have read-only access to your software, particularly if we are performing a remote audit. It really helps to facilitate the audit because we can get in there and run our own reports and view journal entries, maybe look at your controls in the software, maybe we have some questions about your payroll setup. It also kind of saves you a little bit of time because we don't have to interrupt your day with questions so much. And we can keep moving when we can find the answers to our own questions and we're not waiting on responses. Most software is set up to accommodate an account for an auditor like this, and I know you can reach out to your support for help if you don't know how to set it up. I guess I would also mention the bank statements. We do request a lot of bank statements, about 13 months worth, so we want all of the bank statements for each month of the fiscal year, and then the first month of the subsequent fiscal year as well, because we use that to confirm the June 30 balances, and we also use it to pull samples for cutoff testing. And that would be for all cash accounts, your operating account, your payroll account, your student activities accounts. Maybe you have a separate lunch account. We're also looking for all of your statements for your investment accounts, so we can confirm your investment balances and your investment earnings. Those statements are typically quarterly, so we'll be looking for 5 quarters of statements for those. Oh, okay. And yeah, those are about the 2 items that I wanted to mention. The other one that was on the first page that I didn't want to mention, we asked for payroll liability reconciliations, and we'll talk about payroll liabilities a little bit in some future slides, but that's an area where we really get bogged down sometimes if payroll liabilities aren't being reconciled, and if we're coming in At the end of the audit, now we're dealing with 12 months of activities trying to reconcile account balances and for material, and that makes it difficult, and it can prolong the audit because we don't really have time in our schedule to do those reconciliations.
So after a pre-audit, either, if you don't have a pre-audit, we just jump right into audit, we have to do all the audit, and then we move on to substantiating your year-end balances. So the focus really is on the numbers. Less control testing at this point, unless we didn't do something before, that we know about, like control testing now. And this is also when we do federal compliance audit. Again, this can be done remotely and also be done on site, so and this is sort of important, I think, it's just focusing on how to ensure most efficient audit review. Software access, making sure that you're going to but we do see that it's happening a lot when we don't get the information fully reconciled and colleagues just mentioned that those audits down. And it's up to you guys now too, so what about you, taking to do this, and don't have time, and it can be difficult. Also providing the CFO as soon as possible is really helpful to us because there are times when we can use single purpose testing, which makes it easier to pull as much information for us, so if we have that information, we can provide it, that's really helpful. And I mentioned this already, but providing everything on time and communicating with the manager goes obviously in making sure that the audit runs smoothly. This is our audit checklist and what I'll point out.
So our audit checklist obviously is much more extensive. It's 3 pages. There's really a lot of documentation obviously required to do a complete and thorough audit. A couple of things that I would mention on the second page. We ask for your NEO reports. The reason that we ask for those is because we provide a reconciliation to the state of the differences between what you uploaded and what your audited financial statements show, and that's typically accruals, especially if you operate on a cash basis during the year. That's primarily the biggest difference. We ask that you download those from NEO because I know, from experience having been a business manager, sometimes under pressure to get the files in on time, you manipulate the files, you can pass the edits, but you don't necessarily make those changes in your accounting system. So we want to be sure that, that way we know if it comes from NEO, that it is in fact what you. We ask for your remittance reports from neighbors. If you have a teacher plan and a PLD, we want all 12 months of remittance reports for both plans because we do test your contributions. We make sure that we're turning proper percentages. Another one I highlighted on there is your food service claims reports. A lot of times your lunch program may be a major federal program, so we're testing that. But we always look at it not just from the compliance audit, but from for the financial statement audit as well. There's a really nice, neat report, a 1-page report. I'm noticing from different schools we're getting different information. Sometimes they get detailed claims for all the months, and that's 40 or 50 pages maybe. There's a nice, concise report that your food service director can print off for you. We'll show you a sample of that later on, but it summarizes all of your claims for your regular school nutrition program for the year. It also shows your accounts receivable. It identifies your federal revenues and your state revenues so that we know what share of the program is federal and what share is state funded. And then they have the same report for your food service program if you participate in that as well. Student activities. Student activities is another one that I highlighted. A lot of times when we go to do the audit, the student activity information hasn't come over from the schools, or it may not be complete, it may not be reconciled. Now that we've gone to GASB 84, we might not have the information that we need for revenues and expenditures because they're no longer agency funds. So it really helps if you can, get ahead of us with that information, have it available at the central office, especially if the accounting for that is decentralized and you're not using your accounting software. I know when I was at S81, the school sent over the bank statements, the reconciliations, copies of all of their backup, the receipts and disbursements for each month, which was excellent. I had that all ready for the audit when it was time to go, and copies of everything that they needed. And I had their summary of the activity reports for the month as well.
So now we're gonna do a little bit of a, I'm gonna be the auditor saying this is the problem that we're seeing, and then Holly's gonna help you guys with some tips and tricks on how. So, the biggest thing that we see, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is missing account reconciliations. Your trial balance is not full. Probably create the largest hold up in an audit for us, whether that is just the accounts not reconciled at all, or we're missing the detailed list of what makes up the balance, or we don't have the supporting documentation that supports the list. So we're going to review the list, we're going to ask them to give us, since we've already had that stuff available and uploaded to us or available on the desk office, it's going to make things go a lot more smoothly. In this area, though, the biggest issue that we usually see is bank statements. Specifically, I'd say CD statements because you only can get one when it rolls over. And a lot of times there's a lot of back and forth with the bank to get that. Online banking now is going to be. Or the signer or the person who created the CD no longer works there, and for some reason they get changed over to the bank. There are so many weird things that can happen because these accounts can kind of like set and forget. So just being aware that we really wanted to see those things. It's helpful. We also see some issues with just accounts not being reconciled, period, but also controls around bank accounts where there's no signing off that they prepared it, nobody signing off that they reviewed it, or not even having that. And then stale dated checks is another thing that we usually do look for. Any check that's greater than 6 months, search, voided, and reissued to the vendor and to
So some tips and tricks, obviously, stay on top of your account reconciliations, do them, on a timely basis. Scan your documents as you are going along, because then that way, if we're asking for 13 months, it's not really as big of a deal. We've already got them scanned and ready to go to upload for the audit. Each account, should be reconciled, and make sure that the reconciled balance agrees to the account balance on the general ledger of the trial balance. You should be investigating those and adjusting them before the audit.
So other than the bank accounts, we do also see issues with other general ledger accounts on your balance sheet. Not agrees, subsidiary ledgers. A lot of times this is because you're getting balance items not cleared out, such as the accounts payable. And something that's looked back last year was reversed in the current year. And then payroll items, Holly's already talked about that a little bit. So you're not staying on top of it, especially if something's not set up the way it was supposed to in the software.
Just a sample word paper that you can provide for and you should be providing these, we call these lead sheets. You really should be providing this type of thing for each major balance sheet account. And you can see it's really nothing fancy. This is one that a client did for us on an audit that I just finished up recently. The client did a really good job. They identified, this is for accounts receivable, they identified every accounts receivable account on their trial balance, and the total in the account. They compared it to the prior year balance, provided an explanation, of why it may have fluctuated significantly so that we can assess it for reasonableness. And then down below, they provided a detailed listing of what makes up their accounts receivables balance. You can see the total of the detailed listing agrees to the total of the balances on the in the accounts. And then highlighted there in that yellow, I took out their references, but they uploaded all this information, and they referenced a file from where I could find all of the support for each of the accounts receivable that they had reported. This work paper really kind of is set up more for someone that operates cash basis and then records their accounts receivable at year end for the audit, as opposed to maybe you're maintaining accounts receivable all year long in your accounts receivables module. If you are doing that, the top section still is definitely relevant and helpful, so that we know all of the accounts that make up your accounts receivables balance, and then you should be providing your subsidiary ledger with all of your customers, and then what's outstanding, the billings that are outstanding with those customers, and primarily it's probably the state, maybe the towns, maybe some tuition, things like that. But the total balance of that report should be the 1.5 million that makes up all of your account balances. And if you have a variance between your subsidiary ledger and your trial balance, then you should be looking at your GL detail to figure out why. It could be, like she mentioned, maybe some beginning balances weren't backed out, maybe something was misposted to accounts receivable, maybe something was put through the AR module and then somebody didn't realize it and went in and made a journal entry and double booked your receivables. There's lots of reasons why there could be that variance. But when you have that variance and it's not reconciled, then that again slows us down to try and figure out why it's off.
This is like really nice, but we don't expect you necessarily to make a lead sheet for us. That is something that we do as part of our audit. But when we get something like this, or a client who put together a lead sheet, it's like, we're really grateful for it. But obviously that's like the top step. If you're newer to this job and you're just trying to get your feet under you, we don't expect this necessarily. I do it.
Yeah, sorry if I came on strong there. And this is another one, this is almost the very same thing. It's for one that I actually prepared for my auditor when I was at SAB1. We were cash basis there, so that I would convert from cash basis to accrual basis at year end. So you can see it's very similar to the other one paper. We just receivable, I listed all of my accounts on the trial balance, and make up my accounts payable on the balance sheet, and then I listed all of our vendors that we owed money to at the end of the year, and then behind that I provided copies of all of the invoices so the auditor could test them. I had the purchase orders, if they wanted to test controls, that information was all there too. They could see the sign-offs, they could see the check stubs, the check number, when payment was made, and all of that. Yeah, I think I pretty much did, maybe other than the payroll liability accounts. That's really kind of on the next slide. So a lot of times we are seeing that payroll liability accounts aren't being reconciled, maybe not at all, or maybe not timely. As I mentioned earlier, that can really slow us down if we have material account balances. I used to do payroll. I worked my first job as a business manager. I worked for a really small district. I was payroll, accounts payable, and the business manager. I was in the habit of reconciling my liability accounts every payroll. I think we do make the recommendation to do it at least quarterly, but a lot of those accounts should be zeroing out. Like if you're remitting your payroll taxes every 2 weeks, they should be zeroing out after the payroll. Main PERS, obviously, we only pay that once a month. So at the end of the month, you may have 1 month's worth of main PERS, but that's really it. It pretty much should tie to remittance reports. If these things aren't working out that way, you should be looking into them and trying to reconcile them. You're always probably going to have a balance in your benefits account for health deductions and things like that. It's really a good idea to reconcile those accounts each payroll as well. And when you pay the bill, keep the list, by employee. It doesn't just affect the district really, this is a big one for employees as well, because if you're not reconciling and you're not withholding correctly, that could be material to that employee.
If you have unreconciled variances and maybe you just came in, you're replacing someone and you don't know how long that's been sitting on the books forever, we're happy to talk with you about whether or not you're starting at zero. Another area, I know Holly already did talk about this on the student activities accounts, this really is something that we do look at really closely, and we have noticed a lot of times that we'll ask for this information, and we get on site and they say, oh, well, all that's at the school buildings, and the person can bring it over to me. Oh, that might not be as simple for us, because it's all there sitting there waiting for us. That's really great. A lot of times we notice, I'm sure you guys have noticed too, and probably get very frustrated, sufficient supporting documentation for cash disbursements and cash receipts from student activities. Also, those accounts are not being run through people's accounting software oftentimes, more now that MeASBO is on the scene, but or separate software. And lastly, we do still have some places that are tracking these as agency funds, showing that revenues and expenses and carrying fund balance nowadays.
So tips and tricks, I think we kind of talked about this, really kind of maybe taking the time to do a self-audit, before we come on site. Make sure you have all the records, make sure they're reconciled, balanced, that we have a summary of the activity for each of the separate cash accounts of revenues and expenditures that Jordan mentioned, so that we can, I say we, really they're your financial statements, so that you can present them fairly in your financial statements. Ideally, you should be using the accounting software. Student activity tracker was great. If some of you are lucky enough to have ProFund still. AptoFund has AA Web. That's actually a pretty good program for student activities as well. I'm not sure about ELP, what they have on, so maybe that's not really yet. Covers that. I guess we did provide a summary here. This is what, this actually came from AA Web for a middle school cash account. And this is kind of what is needed to be able to present the information correctly as the 84 format. We need, a beginning cash balance, we need the revenues and the expenditures for the year for the cash account, and then the ending cash balance, which pretty much is your ending fund balance. This is broken out, by sub-account for that cash account, and we should be able to take the report and tie it to the end of the year, the last year's audit. So we know the beginning balance is correct. And if the software isn't used to maintain these accounts, then they should be providing a spreadsheet of this information.
Away from account balances and talking about supporting documentation for transactions. A lot of times we notice insufficient supporting documentation, specifically in student activities, but also we provided a list of the things that we would normally like to see as very thorough checks and provide them and a bank receipt that match and a cash receipt. The invoices that would be paid by the vendor or a copy of the check stubs that we paid invoices to make sure what was paid was posted in the period. And also we noticed that deposits are not received, especially in student activities that we receive. I've seen like 100. So just keeping in mind that there are statutes that require money to be deposited in 10 days is something that could be enforced. days, that is helpful for you guys, just so you're staying on top of your transaction.
Here we're recommending that you implement a control process, have like a summary sheet for your deposit, sign off, have the preparer sign off, have a reviewer sign off too, so you're kind of mitigating some of the lack of segregation that you use by having more than one person here with the deposits, and attest to the fact that all of the supporting documentation is there and that it does agree to the total of the deposits. You know, in small schools, I know lack of segregation of duties can be a challenge, but there are always ways to get people involved, whether it's, you know, maybe it's the administrative secretary of the superintendent, maybe it's the superintendent himself or herself, with, you know, journal entries and bank reconciliation reviews and things like that. You know, there are ways to be creative. And then with deposits not being timely, obviously, you know, it needs to be a policy. Make it a policy that money goes to the bank at least weekly. I've seen, when I was a business manager, there was $3,000 that got lost for a student activity account, and the poor secretary, she was really good at her job, but she was so sick about it. Thankfully, 3 months later, it turned out she had stuck it in a file instead of where she normally puts it. She got interrupted. You know, so things do happen, but if you have a policy in place and you're doing it more frequently, you're at a lot less risk for things like that or for fraud.
First touch disbursements goes, it's the same scenario with what we're seeing as an audit issue, is just not having disbursements that you have made. The invoices that you provide should support the full amount of purchase. So a lot of times what we see is that either not all the invoices that add up to the amount of the check are provided. Also, a lot of times as far as controls around disbursements go, there's missing approvals or missing, not even all having no sort of control process over that. You don't expect everybody to be using purchase. Have to support that, but approval on is helpful to make sure that it's being approved and it's something that someone. If you use purchase orders, one of the big things that we see is that people are getting out buying, and there are reasons that that can happen. I'll a little bit, but that, you know, that's a strong control you can have in place if you are large enough to be using purchase orders. Purchase order has to be acquired first, and then we also see people paying sales tax. Tax exempts here, so making sure that all of your staff know that, and anyone who's purchasing knows that, and that they're, you know, following up with that. And then we also see people paying fees, which not being a good steward of the public funds.
Some tips and tricks, so we kind of recommend doing kind of like an internal audit. You may be, as a business manager, you may also be the accounts payable person, so that may be you. If not, you may have an accounts payable manager in your office, have them go through quarterly, make sure that all of the disbursements on record are properly supported, there's an approval there, a purchase order if applicable. You know, sometimes there's just a check stub and it's like, you can't really test that. Yes, we can tell you made a payment, but why? You know, what period does it apply to? What was for from a legitimate payment? You know, make sure you have some sort of invoice to substantiate every type of disbursement. Then, you know, this one is, as a business manager, I found this one really tough. It has to do with control at the top. And it really kind of too depends on your structure. Like I've worked, I know some business managers, like maybe transportation, food service may report directly to them. And the districts that I've worked for, they report directly to the superintendent. So enforcing something like this, you know, you really have to have the support of the superintendent. Policies is a matter of education. Just because the budget's passed doesn't mean you get to run amok. Yes, it is your budget, but it's really the school's budget, and you don't always get everything in for it, that type of thing. used to get so frustrated because I had purchase orders come through, and I had no choice but to approve it. We owed the money. We already had the stuff, you know, so. You have to work really hand in hand with your department heads to enforce that one. Paying sales tax, as she mentioned, are all tax exempt. Making sure that people are aware of that they take a copy of this, that they're supposed to take a copy of the sales tax exempt certificate with them when they travel. Try to encourage them to set up shop at places where you already have tax exempt accounts set up. If you're purchasing fuel and you weren't able to get your fuel set up on a tax exempt status, most places will do that, but not all. Make sure you're submitting your quarterly fuel tax reimbursement to the state and paying late fees. It's been my experience as a business manager that, you know, most frequently you see that with credit cards because you have a tough time getting people to get you the documentation that you need to substantiate the charge. Again, it's a matter of educating, have a policy in place. If you're going to use a school credit card, you need to get this information in, you know, a day or two or whatever for that very reason.
Either you didn't post all of it, so you posted expenses and on revenues, or vice versa. Or what was posted just wasn't what would be, that's an amendment. You haven't updated the budget in your accounting software. You know that, we can't see it unless we put it in the software, so that a lot. And then also we see a lot of times that transfers are approved to different funds, you can fund food service or reserve account that you're building. And those, even though they were approved, when we get to come time to audit the journal, we see that one never actually happened. So, for example, we got reserve account.
So, you know, make sure you set maybe a calendar reminder. I mean, as schools, you have to upload within, I think it's like, you have 30 days, Paula, maybe to upload after we pass our budget. So you're probably on top of it anyway. I used to put mine in before the budget passed most of the time, and generally you have a good pulse on it anyway, and if it is going to change, you already know where you're going to make cuts. It's not that big of a deal to update it. Make sure you're putting your revenue and your expenditures in both. Sometimes we're seeing just the expenditures are being put in. You have to upload both. So our budgetary controls. Have somebody in your office go over it, make sure it's accurate, and you're looking at it, you know, when we come in to test. And if you have any amendments, make sure that you're posting those properly.
Switch gears and talk a little bit about when you figure into town controls. Lack of segregation duties is a big issue, especially in smaller offices. Bringing in more people, but basically what we're saying here when we say you have a lack of segregation duties is that incompatible duties are being performed by the same person. When you're thinking about your processes, you need to be thinking, is there the opportunity to commit a fraud and also move over? That exists in your office, you need to start segregating those duties. And we have an example here of just, you know, duties that are compatible in one process and not necessarily saying that like the different person swap between so that one person, unless they're colluding, one person couldn't hide something without the other person's information.
So yeah, review your processes, make sure you know where your weaknesses are, where there's exposure or risk for fraud. You know, try to redesign your controls to strengthen them as best as you can. I think I mentioned, I used to have the superintendent review all my journal entries, my bank reconciliations. I did that to protect myself as much as the district. You really don't want to be the one with all that responsibility. You know, maybe you're figure out how to best redesign things, get buy-in. A lot of times the easiest and the best opportunity for change is when you have turnover.
In academic period 2.
So as far as the
I don't understand where this number came from, or what is. Take the time when you get the draft to review it. If you have questions, reach out.
Yeah, you really want to make sure that your internal records match the audited financial statements. Again, can't really stress enough, these are your financial statements, they're not ours, we're just supposed to be opining on them. We do propose adjustments, but really they're your adjustments. And if you don't post the adjustment, reconcile your internal records to the audited financial statements, next year when we start the audit, the beginning balances are off, and already, that's going to slow us down. We'd be happy, sometimes you maybe don't understand the adjustment, maybe you're not sure if it needs to be posted or not. Have that communication, we're happy to work with you on that for sure. Some reclassification entries necessarily don't need to be posted, some entries will need to be reversed. If you're not sure which entries need to be reversed in the following year, just, make sure you have that conversation. Another thing I don't mention is, once you provided us your trial balance, you really should not be adjusting the trial balance anymore, because we were working in different directions at that point. If you don't know, if you do have to make a change, then please make sure you provide the entry so that our balances reflect your final balances.
Okay, so that is the end of the financial statement audit. And just we're going to switch over to compliance. So the common pitfalls during an audit, again, we talked about this, not all checklist items not being provided by the to fully reconcile and complete trial balance in an Excel format is helpful for us. Not every audit firm uses it in Excel, but we upload it into our system that we work out of and our adjustments as we making sure we have that is helpful. And then, like I mentioned before earlier, it was piecemeal. It's better if you're getting us everything on time and you can rearrange our schedules to make more time to do that later in the next month or whatever it is. Also, if you have some sort of if there's a reason like all of a sudden last minute you can't be there, let us know. We actually have a staff person on site today who visited had gone out for a family emergency, and she went to ask for bank statements, and the other ladies in the office were like, sorry, we don't know. So her time there is really inefficient for you guys to talk about. There are people trying to find this information while the business manager is out, so just communication is really key. And another thing, I think, if you guys have questions during the year, just especially if it's something that's going to affect your trial balance. Balance and it just slows us down. So making sure that you communicate that during the year so that you can get it in, get that done, and keep off your back and moving along is helpful. We talked about ensuring the efficient audit already. Probably just on the head. This, I think, the summary is the most important. Is preparing for your audit should be considered a year-long task. Something like reconcile your bank account, scan it right then and there, put it in a folder, and then when it comes time to audit, you just upload that folder, or you just print it out, or you just put it on the desk. It's done, it's ready. It's kind of like spring cleaning, like it's better to just clean a little bit throughout the year than it is to I was an auditor when I was preparing for auditing. I would just get everything ready as I went. Okay, we're going to switch gears quickly. We're not going to listen to me. Compliance audit before Tyler and probably take it away. So a federal compliance audit, if you really have one before, I don't know what it is when an entity, a non-federal entity, spends $750,000 or more dollars in a single fiscal year of federal specific audit that is compliance-based. And we're going to come in and look at these regulations and make sure that you've done everything in compliance with the grant agreement, federal regulations, terms and conditions, just make sure that everything is kosher, because everybody wants to make sure we're all spending their money appropriately. So that's a brief overview of what that is. Referred to as a single audit. Single audit and compliance audit are the same thing, essentially, but when we call it a single audit, what we're saying is when the same audit firm is doing a financial statement audit and a federal compliance audit, they're doing it as one engagement or one single audit. That's where that term came from. And then how we know how much you guys spent, how we know if you need to have an audit. You're all required to put together a schedule of expenditures and federal award to report the expenditures. If you've never done that before, you think you might be close to that $7,000 limit, talk to your audit manager.
All right, so when we're doing the single audit, we're testing quite a few different areas, or we may be testing quite a few different areas. And some of these areas are going to be part of every program, but some of them are going to be driven by the whichever federal agency is overseeing them. But so just real quickly, some of those areas are going to be controls over and compliance with the federal. So it's going to include a lot of activities and allowable costs. So that's going to be every single program. So in general, we are looking at the controls over and compliance with each of these areas. So I'm not going to read all of these. You guys can get these slides. And then, so here's some other ones that can come up during your audit. I do kind of want to hit a little bit on the special tests, because some of these are going to come up depending on which federal program. And so when we're looking at your USDA program or your food service program, there's quite a few different special tests that can come up as part of that federal compliance. And because they can include as many special tests as they want to, if they're doing that as a compliance area, they're like food service and Title I have 4 different special tests. And so they're going to do every one of those special tests if it applies to your federal program. And then ESSER, of course, has the wage rate certification, which I know it has been new to a lot of schools since the ESSER came out. Not many other programs that Department of Ed provides has enough allowability that it would come up previously as part of a single audit. So when we're looking at the CFA preparation, there's a few things to kind of look at as part of that preparation. So A, as Jordan and I think Holly kind of noted, get that CFA to us as soon as possible. The sooner you get it to us, the sooner we can do major program determination to know which programs are going to be tested, and then we can let you know which programs and start that process as early as possible. Sometimes the testing can go really fast, but other times there can be a lot of back and forth depending on the program that we're testing. And so it should be reconciled to your underlying accounts. So we talked about the trial balance and just making sure that whatever you're putting on that CFA is matching your trial balance. Sometimes we end up, so you should be providing us a CFA with the correct trial, tying it out to the trial balance. We'll also do that, but we're going to send it back to you for your approval that yes, you agree with that, agree with what we've done. And it should only reflect federal award expenses. So there's kind of 2 different pieces to this. So first, making sure that it only actually has federal awards on it. You shouldn't be including any state grants or if you got any private grants. But we also don't want any encumbrances on that as part of the CFA. So if you've encumbered money for a future year, expenses that were
I had a quick question about how you guys tackle the reconciliation with the P100, because that's, the cash base versus
Right.
Yeah,
We,
it makes me cranky.
It's hard.
It is.
So do you have,
well, we have the P100, I was kind of going to cover that, but we essentially, because the P100 from the state is cash basis, so we look at each program, what you had for receivables of the prior year. You would back out the prior year receivable from the P100, add in the current year receivable amount to the P100, and that should reconcile to what we have for revenue.
That's about what we're doing. I just want to know if there was any genius way to.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes I have found where payments have been left off the P100. At the school I just audited, all of the reimbursements they received in June for April and May, they had billed 2 months in June, and they were paid around the middle of June. Those payments were left off the P100 altogether. First time I'd ever seen that, but sometimes you do find unusual
Like
things
if
like that.
the check maybe wasn't cut till 7/1 or something like that, even though.
Well, actually, the checks were cut, and I saw I could trace the payments to the bank statement, and I could see the exact amount I could tie to their remittances, if that's what they were off. I had backed out the receivables in the prior year and added in the current year, and we were off those June payments. That one, I don't know if something happened with the vendor code, I don't know, but just that one time. But that's the only time I've ever run into that. But every now
and I know it's going to be harder, but Apollo worked really hard on getting the controller's office to ensure that there's one vendor code per school unit. In previous years, there might be 5 or 6, I don't know, 5 or 6, but there was a lot of
Yeah, we
vendor
used
codes,
to have a
multiple
lot.
vendor codes for one unit, so
Right.
that created a lot of activity.
Thank you.
That? Okay. I was really confused, so thank you. So so some guidance, for all your federal grants, so make sure, and we have an example of the CFA, so we can, look at this specifically, or some of these items on that. But, so list each individual program, individually, and you want them all under the federal program, and then you want them, each agency combined as well. So think about it as, you have your individual grants. Some of those are gonna fall under a cluster, so think IDA is a good one for that. So IDA has both the 3 to 20 funds plus the 3 to 5 funds. That's a single cluster, or ESSER has multiple funds, and that's a cluster. So you're gonna cluster those together under one cluster, and then those are all Department of Education funds, so you're gonna list those all together under Department of Education. And so, again, you're gonna wanna provide that agency name, and provide, the total amount for each cluster as well. And you, sorry. Okay, so I think I got that as well. And then you only want, so we kind of noted before, you only want funds that are actually originating from a federal source. Don't include any state grants or any local funds. Make sure you're talking with who you're getting those funds from to make sure that they are local or state and not federal. We have seen times when maybe you get it from a nonprofit to do a project, but they had gotten those funds from a federal source to do that. So you want to make sure that you know the actual source of the funding. And then so with education grants, a lot of times, so we have a couple of examples here with both IDA and ESSER, that you're including the letter designator. And so a lot of times this is, talking about different programs within the same CFDA. So when we're thinking ESSER is, has quite a few different, but usually we're seeing either a D or U. And so when you're listing out the grant on the CFA, you need to include that letter as well. And so for those, we've seen it before where people just put ESSER, and here's all of our funds for ESSER. Well, we need to split out between the different designations. And when it is COVID-19 funds, you need to also include COVID-19 within the description. And if you have funds that are coming that are both COVID-19 and non-COVID-19. So we saw that some with the IDA funds, some of it was coming through the ESSER grants, specific for IDA, but then some of it was obviously you had your normal grants from IDA. So the good thing is you're using two different revenue codes, so you kind of have an idea of where those funds are coming from. Make sure that you're splitting those out on your sheet. And so when we're talking about subrecipient grants, there's kind of two different ways to think about this. So if you're the subrecipient, you need to provide on your CFA who granted you those funds. So again, most of your funds are coming through Maine Department of Education, so you just need to let us know that. But if you have some funds from either Maine CDC or Department of Transportation, I don't, any of the other state agencies, or if it's coming through from a local nonprofit, you're getting some funds from there. You need to provide who provided those funds to you. And then if you're providing the funds as instead of as a contract, but as a subrecipient to other people, you need to tell us how much you're providing in grant funds to other agencies. And then so here we kind of have a CFA, and we can see all those things in action. So we can see, we have quite a few different Department of Education grants, and we can see that they're all clustered together, and we see the individual, the IDA funds are clustered together, and the ESSER funds. In this particular case, we don't have more than one ESSER fund. And then we can see that this unit also got some funding from Department of Treasury, and they're listing out COVID-19 where that's applicable, and then we've got the total federal awards.
Just some tips and tricks that I kind of learned to help prepare for the CFA, because sometimes it can be really hard to identify if a grant is federal or not. As a business manager, you may not be involved, it may not be in grants for me or GEMS, and they don't always think about giving you all the information that you need when they've applied and awarded these grants. And I don't remember, I know that someone from the state, I don't know if it was Tyler, Joanne, Paula, maybe Denise, who gave me this nice tip, but the revenue codes, I had been a business manager a long time before I knew that the revenue codes were different for federal grants versus state grants. 4 identifies a federal grant, 3 identifies a state grant. If you happen to have the state's accounting code, then you can identify federal grants by the fund number, 013, 015, 023, 025. Those are federal numbers. If it starts with 010, that's a general fund. That's a state grant. And then, of course, we talked about the P100. The P100 has useful information on it to identify federal grants as well, because they provide the ALN or the CFDA number on the P100. Sometimes they leave off a little letter at the end, but the main CFDA number for the program is provided. They also provide the fund number on the P100. And if you're not familiar with the P100, I did provide the link where you can download the P100 for your unit for the fiscal year, and it's a record of all payments that the state made to your district by program for the fiscal year. So it's helpful not just for the CFA, but also for the financial statement audit and making sure that your revenue is all recorded and that it's complete and that it's recorded in the correct grant or state funding source. Here's a sample of a P100 that I downloaded for one of our clients. Just took the unit, the vendor code and the unit name out. I highlighted the fund. You can see that the fund lines up at that 013, 025, 023. They have CFDA numbers there as well, because those are all grants. We also use this for the school nutrition. So that is, the school nutrition program is kind of one exception. where we have to kind of look at your revenue to be able to identify what your federal expenditures are, because your school nutrition program is both state funded and federally funded. So the way that we identify your federal expenditures from the program is by the amount of federal revenue that you received. So we can pick that up here from the P100, and also from the following slide. This is the report I referred to earlier, that nice, neat, clean summary report that as auditors we like to work with, as opposed to all of the pages and pages of the detailed points. So this is from CNP Web. Your food service director can print this off for the fiscal year for your school nutrition program and for your summer food service program if you participate in that program as well. They have the same report. The first two columns identify the federal revenue. The match column, that's the state revenue. So we use those amounts to determine the federal share of your school nutrition program for the CFA.
All right. So some common audit issues that can come up, of course, is around the supporting documentation. And so when we're testing compliance, it requires to review a large amount of documentation, of course. And so we're going to send you probably lists and lists of we need this, we need that. So when we're doing the federal programs, a lot of times we'll ask you initially for your list of expenditures, and then we're going to send you back saying we need supporting documentation for all these different expenditures. And then of course, if we're having to test multiple programs at your school district, then that just adds to the number of documents. And then as we test other programs, there's going to be required documentation for that as well. And of course, the sooner you get that back to us, the quicker we can kind of get it done. If you'd like us to come on site, as Jordan noted, communicating that ahead of time, we do have people that can go on site through most of the state, or we'll kind of spend the night somewhere so we can be a little bit closer and still come on site. And then one of the things that can kind of make this difficult, so as we're talking about education programs, is you're not necessarily in control of the documentation for all the different parts that we're testing. So when we're thinking about IDA, if we're thinking about ESSA, so the Title I funds, that's in charge of that program, and so sometimes and the year-end reports or the performance reports, and so you may have to request that documentation from them. When we're looking at, say, the Title I specifically, we're looking at graduation data or testing security, and so we're going to need to talk to the people that are actually in those tasks. So we're just going to need your help in that coordination. So when we're looking at the supporting documentation, it helps to designate somebody to maintain a file for each grant. And so the grant file should include copies of the grant award notice, grant agreement, and the amendments. And we're going to ask, so we'll ask for those up front. So if we're doing the Title I program, that's something we're going to ask for right up front. And then if you have any sub-grant agreements, we're going to ask for those. And I know a lot of times, especially at least in Maine, they don't do a lot of sub-grants with other individuals or with other organizations, but it does come, it does come up here and there. More so what's going to happen is your contract. So we're going to actually want to see a list of those contracts that you have under the fund. So if we're testing procurement, we're going to need to see those, at least a list of the contract, and then we'll test specific contracts. If we're testing equipment or assets, we're going to need to see a list of that equipment. And so, and I know this has come up a number of times in some of our audits where maybe you point us to your asset listing that you've already provided to us, but that doesn't hold a lot of the required elements that's required by the feds as far as what needs to be in your equipment list for federally purchased programs. So a lot of times you're going to have to actually maintain a separate list if you're purchasing equipment for the federal funds. And then So any reports that are filed, so again, you mentioned like performance reports or year-end reports, you're gonna wanna see all of those. And then we will, at least wanna see a list of your drawdown requests that you've done for the grant. So some of this is looking to make sure that you're doing it on a periodic basis and not just waiting until the end of the year and, oh, I'm gonna draw down all my funds. Really, you should be trying to draw those funds down on a periodic basis. And I know the state is trying to get school districts to do it either at least on a quarterly basis, but even, you know, sometimes on a monthly basis.
Yeah, so you also want to make sure, you know, that you provide copies of all of the policies and procedures for how you track and make sure you comply with these federal grants. Jordan had mentioned earlier the questionnaires. You know, we have a questionnaire for the single audit as well. Really make sure, you know, you're putting some thought into the questionnaire when you're answering it. It can be kind of annoying. There are a lot of questions on there, you know, but we do need to know what you're doing, how you're handling these funds. Your answers dictate how we design our testing and approach that we take. The more thorough you are, the less follow-up questions that we have to have, the less we have to kind of interrupt through.
Whoops. So we're gonna go over some areas. How are we doing on time? Okay. So we'll try to do a couple of these areas, and then even if we don't go over them, you still get the slides and can kind of see what we're going to talk about. So when we're looking at control testing, of course, Jordan talked a lot about control testing, and so we're looking at your process. So, you know, what do you use on how you do purchases? Do you use purchase orders? Do you use a different process? So remember the fact that you have the document, say an invoice. Invoice isn't itself the control. It's how you process that invoice, you know, that becomes the control. And so we're looking at how you process the documentation to ensure that you're within compliance of the federal grant. So a lot of times we're doing this through questionnaires. And again, so questionnaires on how does this align with the federal grant? You know, so special ed, of course, you can only spend funding on special ed expenses. So you either need to be directly related to providing instructions to the special ed students, or, you know, related services or something, you know, something similar to that. And each program, of course, has different requirements. So how do you ensure that that expense aligns with the federal program, and how do you ensure it aligns with 2 CFR Part 200? So again, and we're going to ask a lot of questions, and that's going to dictate how we're actually doing the test. So if you tell us you have a certain process, and, you know, in some districts, again, take IDA, and all of those expenses are going through the special ed director, we're going to want to see how to ensure that that expense has gone through, that they've approved those expenses as aligning with the program. But again, so your questionnaire back to us, your answers are going to dictate how we actually do the testing. So just real quickly, we're looking at AP versus payroll. Again, you know, AP a lot of times, well, here's some examples on what we would look at for AP. And then for payroll, we're going to want to be able to tie that out. So looking at the bargaining agreement, if it's teachers that are being paid, or ed techs, a lot of times they have bargaining agreements. We're going to want to see that, and then see their contract, an individual employee's contract, and ensuring that whatever the contract says aligns to the bargaining agreement, and then looking at their actual paycheck, and if they require a timesheet, looking at that timesheet, and just making sure everything aligns. And then if it's a grant that requires time and effort, we'll need to see that documentation as well.
Academic period 3.
So when we're looking at, I talked a little bit at least about compliance testing. We have other questions that talk about how do you ensure compliance. So again, is that activity allowed under the grant? Was it necessary and reasonable? So I think you guys have all heard, I mean, I know when I worked with the state, we talked about, you know, like not going out and buying necessarily the item, but you're buying reasonable item that will perform the task you need it to perform. And then lastly, of course, that it actually aligns with your own policies and procedures. So those policies and procedures are at least somewhat dictated by federal requirements, but then you may have policies, so the federal government, of course, says equipment is anything that's over $5,000, but you may have a local policy that has a lower threshold. And so if you have a lower threshold, that means you need to include anything on the equipment listing. That means your lower threshold. And so when we're looking at, so one of the areas I wanted to talk about was equipment. And so because it's definitely with the ESSER funds, we are of course testing a lot of equipment that's being purchased. And so whether that's an actual piece of equipment even like a van, we've seen with ESSER funds a lot of like cleaning equipment that's being purchased, or an actual asset. So there's also a lot of ventilation systems that are going into the school, and so those all need to be tracked on your equipment listing. And then the other thing that we're also, because it talks about it in 2 CFR, Part 200, is ensuring that you have policies on how you're maintaining security for that equipment. So of course, if it's part of your building, that's simpler than say if you have a van that may be parked outside and maybe it's not in a locked part of the parking lot. But just understanding how you're providing security for that equipment, and then also how you're maintaining that equipment. So having actual procedures on how that equipment is maintained. I think, so whether that's keeping a maintenance log for your buses, or you have some procedures on how often you're doing ventilation, air ducts need to be cleaned every once in a while, ensure that they're actually serviceable, and the actual fans need to be serviced. So how are you documenting that maintenance? And you also need to do, of course, an inventory every couple of years. And how are you documenting that inventory is being sold? Okay. Yep. The other one, and apparently I talk too much, and really call it a couple. But anyways, so when we're looking at procurement, again, we're looking at your procurement policy and procedure. So that's really going to dictate this, and as long as it is, of course, aligning with the federal procurement requirements. And so we're going to, again, want a full listing of whatever procurement that you're doing, or that you've done during the fiscal year that we're reviewing. So one of the big things that we're kind of running into is ensuring that your procurements that you're doing have all the provisions and the updated provisions that apply to the particular procurement that you're doing. So, one of the things that we've seen is you're doing construction, but maybe not including the wage rate certification requirements, or now we have the Build Back Better America requirements, and not buying Chinese technology. There's a requirement around that, ensuring that that's not occurring. And so if you're buying, say, technology, then you're going to want to make sure that you're including that procurement requirement within your contract.
Beginning.
So, yeah, it's really about maintaining files. I think you've all adopted the federal handbook. I can't remember exactly what the procurement handbook. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I know that it was we adopted into the SAB one that came out a couple of years ago. I'm glad compliance is Tyler and not me, because it made me feel really sick as a business manager, making sure that we were doing everything, and I was always so afraid that we were at risk for noncompliance and jeopardizing our funds. I'm gonna skip ahead, to the form that we have in here, just because we're, short on time. But, this form, and I don't remember if I got this from Drummond and Woodson, or if I got it from the state training that was put on. But once I had this form, I felt a lot more confident about our procurement procedures and that we were doing what we were supposed to be doing. I don't know if you have all seen this, but it's kind of foolproof. It walks you through the process of what you're supposed to do for procuring, whether it's a small purchase, a large purchase, or a micro purchase. If it's less than $10,000, you can pretty much sole source. If it's under $250,000, you should be getting your 3 quotes. You should be documenting that and keeping that in your procurement file. If it's over $250,000, you should be doing your RFP. It takes you through all of that. And then behind that, I would maintain this first in each procurement file, and then behind that I would have the proof of what we did. If we sole source, why did we sole source? Did we get permission from the state to sole source? And in one case at SAB1, we did that, and I had that documentation in the file. It reminds you to do your SAM.gov search if you're spending more than $25,000. So this is, really helpful to make sure that you are complying with procurement. Primarily ESSER, because we really weren't spending money like this before ESSER, so.
So the last item topic within federal compliance that we're gonna talk about, and then I think Jordan has a few last minute items. Okay, we'll have them in the slides, so. But anyways, it is around construction and making sure that you're doing the Davis-Bacon requirements. So keep in mind that any time you're spending over $2,000 on construction, in the combination of both the wages and the price of equipment that's being installed, or if there is equipment, anytime it exceeds that $2,000, you're required to do the Davis-Bacon requirements. And so this is just ensuring that, A, you're including that provision in your contract, and then following up with whoever you choose as a contractor to make sure that they're doing that they are paying the prevailing wages to their employees, and you should be reviewing that, the actual payroll, and sometimes they have their own forms, but sometimes they're using either the Maine Department of Labor forms or the U.S. Department of Labor forms, and so you should be reviewing whatever documentation that they're using to ensure that they're paying the prevailing wages. So as you're before you're writing out checks to them, you should be checking their documentation to make sure that they're actually paying the prevailing wages. And not necessarily, you shouldn't wait until your audit and your auditor says, hey, we need to review your prevailing wage documentation. That shouldn't be when you're requesting that. So make sure, again, you have policy procedures on how you're going to do that, and then has some laws that they're going to do. So.
Davis-Bacon was another one that kind of made me sick, and I think a lot of it has to do with really having good relationships, especially with your maintenance director, because I don't know, like, in the 2 districts that I spent the most time in, maintenance men, they just like to run with things. You get a project where they're ready to spend money, and I think they got pretty sick of me saying, hey, Davis-Bacon, no, we got to put this out to bid. These are federal funds. We can't just do what we normally do. So part of it is working really hard, making sure that they understand, training them as well, because a lot of times they're the ones lining up these contracts. And Woodson provided a great contract it had all of the, and I think Tyler maybe made some changes to it or updated it. It might be on the MeASBO website.
Version, but yeah.
But it had all of the federal addendums and an attachment for the proper wage rates that you can download off SAM.gov. The wage rates should go out with the bid documentation, and that's what you would then attach, even if the contract is further down the road and they've adopted new wage rates. You make sure you use the wage rates that would affect when you do your solicitation. I had in my files for every contract that we had, I had that first form that I showed you, and then we had a federal contract with all of the applicable compliance requirements of the abilities attached in the files as well. I think that for the most part, the other thing It's tough sometimes is making sure that they understand that we would just submit copies of those certified wage rates, tracking those down. I had the best luck going through my maintenance director for those, because he was in contact with us.
It helps. We talked on a lot of these already, and this kind of follows, so just making sure you reconcile. Again, make sure you reconcile your CFA, your trial balance, and assist your auditor. Again, when we need to bring in other people, make sure you're connecting us with the appropriate people. Had a lot of really good luck with everybody that I've worked with so far, and if I need to talk to the Title I director, that they need, connect me with that person. And then just making sure you can get that back to us as soon as possible, so that we can put it into our workflow and get it tested. And then just communicating with the auditor if there's any reason why something, any delay, or if you need to push back, if we were supposed to come on site, like Jordan said, if we need to schedule it, that's fine. But just letting us know ahead of time, so that we're not showing up, and there's not a lot to do.
Class, I'm not going to take a lot of time, because I know we've gone over this, we do have a newsletter that you guys are welcome to subscribe to. The email address for our wonderful administrators is on there if you want to get put on that list, or if you are on our list and for some reason you're not seeing the newsletter, we did send one out yesterday, so if it's in your spam or whatever, you're looking for it, or you can contact me and she can help you figure out ways to make sure that you're actually seeing it. We also have our client relations director, Ashley Larson, who I'm sure a lot of you probably audits if you're one of our clients. But if you have any need for services after everything we talked about, if there are things something like kind of do that before my audit, or we need help getting reconciled or whatever, we have a support services department that can provide a lot of non-test services. And if you get in touch with Ashley, she can talk to you about what services you need and get you in touch with the right person at our firm. Whether you're not a client or not, we're happy to help you. And then all of our email addresses, if anyone needs to contact us, that would be things that are.
Thank you very much. Helpful information as we go through spring and getting ready for June and July, and whenever your audit is at the end of the fiscal year. Are there any questions or items before we break for lunch, or anything for our investment?
Is the PowerPoint going to be on our site?
The PowerPoint will be uploaded by Joanne and given out.
Yeah, I'll send out a listserv email message on Monday once I get them, so I can tell you where to go.
We are trying to archive just about as much as we can. Joanne's been very detailed about that, so always check the website, please, for information. If you don't see it, can't find it, reach out to Joanne. But we are trying to archive as much as possible, including meetings, PowerPoints, and other things, so that there's a database being built there of it. Well, remember the auditors did a presentation, then you can go back and look at that and kind of cycle through that and find what you need. Enjoy lunch. Lunch goes until 1 o'clock. Mingle, meet with the members, meet with your colleagues. I would say go out for a nice walk, but I think it's still, it's 25, it says. Yeah, everyone's
It's gonna
freezing.
change. At least it isn't as windy.
Enjoy lunch, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock with Mindy, and we're all going back to the office and work on budget tonight until midnight.
Yeah, that's a hard no.
It's It's obviously not, absolutely not that. Don't feel bad, I'm not either. So we're gonna have DOE talk about the accounting handbook, account coding. That seemed to be a very interesting topic when we sent out the survey about things that folks really wanted more information about. Unfortunately, Ida couldn't be here today, so you're gonna do your best to lead us through. I'll let you introduce yourself and your background and what you do, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, can you hear me? If you don't know, I'm Denise Towers, School Finance and Compliance Team. Been with the team for 10 years now. Also here is the School Finance and Compliance Director, Paula Gravel, right over there. And we also have,
She stepped out for a minute.
She'll be back in a minute. Is joining us to help with some audit stuff within our office. So, as Colin mentioned, I was going to do some presentation on EPS and coding and such. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here. I'm going to do the best I can with her work. So, I apologize ahead of time if I'm reading off of a notepad. Most of the time, I'll try to look at you and present in a manner, but I don't know the content as much as I know my own content. So, please forgive me if I stray a little bit here and there. So today we're going to talk about financial coding and the EPS formula. The fun in funding just keeps coming, right? That's Paula right there. Those are Paula's words. She loves the word fun.
And she is fun.
She is fun, you're right.
I'll give you the money later. Okay.
So why are my financial submissions important? The reason why they're important is the department is required to report on your financials to the feds so that we can receive as a state title monies, right? And it all wraps up that we use your totals to push to them and they determine what our state needs. Transparency and accountability. Given that you are investing and receiving tax dollars at the state and local level, we all want to make sure that the financial decisions are clear, appropriate, and accurate. Sorry about that. Funding and distribution. These are the components of EPS that are directly informed by your financial information, which we will speak of shortly. And then research. The review of the EPS components. Your financials are used to assess the funding formula and to see if adjustments are needed or if there are gaps, as well as to assess relationships between things such as outcomes, graduation rates, needy standards, etc., with finances, policy analysis, state-to-state comparison, and the occasional graduate student project. These are external to the internal review and research of your data within your SAU, towns, and with your auditor. Your information is necessary to reflect the business of the public education so that sound decisions can be made. Where are your financials? Where do you put them? You are uploading them to the main education financial system. We also reference it as MAPS. MAPS is an electronic system that SAUs use to record the financial data to DOE. The financial data is formatted as a string of codes according to the coding handbook. Put a link to the coding handbook in there. I recommend getting to know the accounting handbook. I recommend making a copy of it, print a copy out, put it in a binder. If there are changes to codes, new codes, exhausted codes, note your binder. Because we update that once a year, you won't always have real-time information unless you're providing that to yourself. When you're using the accounting handbook, I recommend using the Control F feature. This is a control find. You can put a word, you can put in a code. This isn't necessarily going to give you the answer that you want every single time, but it's a way for you to check and see what's in the coding book for the items that you want to reference, right? So use your control F. You can put a code in there, it'll take you right to that code number. Then you can get a description of that code to see if it works for whatever accounting stream you're trying to create. So play around with your control F. Another thing I recommend is to review prior coding updates. And that's on our DOE funding training page. You will see coding updates for each year. And what happens there is we compile, I have a hard copy book that I write in every day almost. And then at the end of the year, Ida and I get together, confer, take all of those additions, subtractions, changes, and we incorporate it into the new handbook, the updated handbook for the next fiscal year. So accounting strings should tell a story, right? So who is paying the expenditure? That would be your revenue source. What program is benefiting from the expenditure? Which is your program code. What is the purpose of the expenditure? Is your function. And then specifically, what is the expenditure? Would be your object code. Your cost center code identifies which building location that expenditure was for. Everybody good about that? So we ask for your financial information every quarter, and we would like to see actual revenue, expenditure, and a balance sheet for that fiscal year, each quarter. Financial data should be uploaded to MeASBO each quarter and contain fund codes series 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and 6,000. SAU is a fiscal agent of a regional program, and they are using Fund 9,000 to track those revenue and expenditures. That fund would also be included. That doesn't have, but I also wanted to make sure that it got put in there. I don't want anybody to think that they never have to show us 9,000, only in certain circumstances. Quarterly updates are expected approximately 30 days after your quarter closes. Quarter 4 files represent a full fiscal year. One of the areas that I like to pinpoint is I almost expect 2 quarter 4s from each unit, almost. And the reason why is because when we're asking you for your quarter 4 originally, from your year-end date. So you may not have your audit done, but we still need your data, right? So we're asking you to submit them by August 30th, but no later than November 15th. Those are your original ones. And the reason why is because we need this data to start calculating stuff in the background. But it is really important that we have your true data, right? So after your preliminary quarter 4 is done, then your audit gets done. If you have audit adjustments, the information that you sent to us does not show those audit adjustments. So we need you to submit a quarter 4 so that we have actual data that matches with your audit. And that may be after November 15th, but it's still necessary. We still need you to show us what's in your system. And when you do an audit adjustment in your system and don't do it in our system, we have a difference. So it's extremely important to remember if you have audit adjustments that affect these files, it's extremely important to get them done. I've shown a picture here of dates. And these are the dates that are set up in MeASBO to accept very specific quarterly report. For example, quarter 1, MeASBO will allow you to upload a quarter 1 file on October 1st. But after December 30th, no. It says, wait a minute, that quarter's over already. So what it does is it puts it in block status. And that's really just like a reminder for you to double check the work. Are you late, or is it a problem in the number that, the quarter that you were uploading to? So if you upload Q1 file after 12/31, then your file will be blocked. And it's not necessarily a problem, but you have to double check to make sure it's the correct file that you wanted to upload. And if it is, you would just make contact with myself or Ida. Budget revenue expenditures. Budget files are required to be submitted by August 15th or within 30 days after the approval of the budget. The file must reconcile with the approved budget backup documentation. Important. This is one of my favorite things to do, by the way, budgets. I do, I really enjoy it. And that's because it's all about reconciling. So when I receive your budget in mass, I'm also looking at your budget backup documentation. And if it says you're raising $100,000 for this purpose, I should see that in mass, right? So the coding should align with what your approved budget says. So I'm going to be looking very specifically at raised funds, total expenditures. So you would upload your budget as a Q1 file, and then you would provide the budget backup documentation so that it can be reviewed. If there is a revision to the budget, the revised budget files would be uploaded and identified as the quarter in which the revision of the budget was approved. So if in the third quarter, your meeting minutes show that it was approved to revise the budget, then that upload should be in a Q3 as a Q3 upload. And these files block as well, and here is the schedule for those files, budget files. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean you've done anything wrong. You're probably either too late, too early, or you just wrote down, or you just uploaded it to the wrong quarter or something. So don't be too alarmed. Most important dates. Budgets must be submitted by August 15th, 30 days after. End of year Q4 files are due by August 30th. All preliminary non-audited data for financials must be submitted to MDOE must be submitted and certified / migrated. We use different words sometimes. The file must be in migrated status by November 15th, again, so that we can use that data. So Ida likes to test things sometimes. She likes to push questions out. So her question is, for FY25 funding calculations, what funding year of data is used and why? Does anybody know? Okay, here we go. Correct. Correct, FY23 data. And why? Because that is the most up-to-date data that we actually have, right? So we want to use the most up-to-date information. The DOE school finance and compliance team starts to calculate FY25 subsidies starting in October. Which means that the most recent completed year of financial data is for the FY23 year. That finishes June 30th, 23. Why all this emphasis on dates? If we have this data, we cannot calculate a state share in a timely manner so that we can set appropriate and efficient budget and prepare and ask of their constituents. It is utilized to inform the mill rate, especially the pieces of the funding formula that are expenditure driven. So if we don't have your information, there's a gap in the totals that we're looking at. Here comes the fun part, ready? Because this is the heavy item. Bear with me. Expenditure-driven components of the E279. An expenditure-driven component utilizes actual SAU data to inform a calculation of an allocation, even when there may be a model associated with a component. This is because there is high variability across the SAUs within these components, and models may not be able to capture all of it. The SAU that we utilize, the SAU data we utilize is general fund, state and local data only. No federal funds, state grants, or private funds are included. Items are allocated funds, not reimbursements. I'm going to say that. Allocated funds, not reimbursements. Just told me to do that. By the way. They are included in the distribution of calculation on the ED 279, section 4, meaning that there is a state share, state and local share. Our expenditure-driven components are located in section 3A of the ED 279 and are special education, general, special ed high cost out of district, bus purchases. As stated earlier, some of these components utilize your financial data directly and some indirectly. GT, transportation and bus purchase, utilize your financials, and if a condition is met, allocation amount is determined. GT, it compares the budget to the actual expenditures, and whichever amount is lower is the amount allocated. These special ed components, directly and indirectly, use financial data. Special ed, high cost out of district, looks directly at expenditures. However, special ed, general, has a model and then uses financials to assess the allocation. We received so many questions on special ed allocations, we will spend most of our time discussing them today. Also, special ed is between 20 and 25% of the total cost of education in the state. It would be good to understand it. For GT, all general fund expenditures for program 4900. For transportation, all general fund expenditures for function 2700 series, except land, building, vehicles, principal and interest. For bus purchases, the bus bid value and term of debt. We will speak of special ed components shortly. These components have their own mini process. Let's talk about special education allocations. Are about state and local tax dollars, not federal dollars or state grants or private funds. The allocation is not prescriptive. The SAU decides how much to budget and spend and which funds it uses for what purpose. The SAU has tuition costs, then the SAU chooses if it spends federal funds or state funds on the tuition costs. Section 3A2 allocates for general special education. Section 3A3 allocates for high cost out of district special education. These two components are associated with each other. For the special education allocation, there are 6 components to these allocations. This is governed by statute 15681-A, other subsidizable. subsidizable, there you go. Cost, number two, subsidized cost number. Number two is special ed costs. And of the 6 components, the last 2, high cost acquisition and maintenance of effort, utilize financial information. This is how the components are defined. Base, 1.5 times SAU weighted EPS rate for the first 15% of special ed population. Times SAU weighted EPS rate for special ed population over 15%. Small size, 0.29 times SAU weighted EPS rate for SAUs with 20 or less special ed pupils. High cost in district, inflated amount of previous year allocation. This piece of the formula was broken. We have not had the data to appropriately calculate this piece because the data required was burdensome for SAUs. So the data requirement was removed. What they're saying there is that'll be the standard for that SAU and with a little bit more, inflated amount, there you go. Add to it a little bit. Okay. Maintenance effort utilizes actual information. Where the allocation must be applied in a specific order, 1 through 6 sequentially. For EPS section 3A, line 2, special ed, general, allocation components 1 through 4 and 6 are included. So that's base, prevalence, small size, high cost in district, and maintenance of effort. For EPS section 3A, line 3, special ed, high cost out of district allocation is component 5. And the final step would be 6, maintenance of effort. So we're going to walk through an example for the All-Stars Public Schools District. First, you start with the EPS rate from section 1 of the ED 279 and subsidy counts from section 2A of the ED 279, so you can create the weighted EPS rate for the district. So in this case, I did some math and made it nice and pretty for us. So the elementary EPS rate is 7,045. Subsidy pupils is 120. Secondary EPS rate is 8,000 with 80 pupils. The weighted rate is the elementary EPS times the elementary students plus the secondary EPS rate times the secondary number of students, all divided by the total number of pupils. So the determination is $7,427. Everybody following that? Good. Okay. Now that we have All-Stars weighted EPS rate, let's start with the special ed formula components 1 through 4. Other data we need to pull and figure out first. From the October 1st student count, we get the number of subsidy pupils and special ed students. So we need to go grab a little bit of information, right? We remove the special ed student counts associated with state agency clients or foster care, since these students are paid from another source, and we do not need to account for these funds twice. Now we can calculate the SAU's prevalence rate and figure out how many students represent 15% and how many special ed students are above the 15%. Once we have these figures, we can calculate the first four components. Oh, because high-cost in-district is weighted, let's assume for All-Star that the previous allocation was $12,485, and the inflation factor for this year is 1.9%. So your component one is your base, and she determined that she would take that 7427 times it by 1.5, giving 30 student, 30 students. There we go. 30 students. So the base is 334,015. The second is prevalence. And you take the amount we just determined and times that 0.38, and then times it by 8, which is the number of the remaining special ed kids. Component 3, small size, is 0 since the SAU has more than 20 special ed students. Component 4, high cost in district, was, as we had indicated a moment ago, and that inflation brought it up to 12,723. These four components together are the formula amount, which equals 369,516. So, if you don't mind, I'd like someone to write down 200 subsidy pupils, 38 special ed count, 4 component total of 369,516. We're going to reference them in a little bit in a slide or two later. But you don't want me to try to go backwards and look at those numbers. So thank you. Now that the first 4 components are calculated, let's work on component 5, which is also line 3 of the ED 279, section 3A, special ed, high cost out of district allocation. We will need data from the fall EFS 07 survey that is submitted in the fall and lists student placements and local and federal expenses for that placement. We only look at local expenses, state and local, not federal expense. We exclude any student records that are for state agency clients or foster care. The allocation is for expenditures above a threshold level by placement. Each year, the threshold level amounts change because the state special ed per pupil amount changes. The state special ed per pupil amount is an average of all SAU's base and prevalence amounts divided by the state total number of special ed pupils. For regional program placements, the threshold is a 2, identifies it as a 2. And public school placements are identified as a 3 type, and then the private is identified as a 4 type. The reason the type matters is because on the next slide, we show an example of maybe a small EFS or high cost out of district. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of walk through this. So it looks like All Stars has a kiddo at a private placement. We know that because the 4 is a private placement. We know that SAU spent $59,157 for tuition for that kiddo. So we all know that there's a threshold to meet before you get a high cost out of district allocation. So on a private school, the threshold is $39,393. The school spent $59,157. So the allocation will be the difference between those two. So in this particular case, this one kiddo allocation will be $19,763. The second line, the placement type is private, but the district didn't spend over the amount of the threshold. So there is a $0 allocation for that particular kiddo. The next one is a regional program, which is identified as a type 2 placement. And here the threshold is 19. District spent more than 27. So the difference is what they'll get in our high cost allocation. Then the last one is the public school, identified as a placement 3. Their threshold amount is 29.5. They only spent 28.5. There's no allocation for high cost out of district. Makes sense? Great. Before we move on to component 6, maintenance of effort, let's talk about the financials that are included. All general fund, state and local only, administrative report services, which are salary, benefits, professional development, paid travel, contracted services, goal. And these are coded in the 2500 program and function 2330 areas. Instructional, salary, benefits, professional development, travel, all the same. Program 2100 through 2400, in 2810, using functions in the 1000 series. Related services, salaries, benefits, professional development, contract services, program 2810 through 2819, using function series 2100 series. Then tuition and board, program 2810 through 2819, using object codes 5130 and the 5600 series. So what you're not seeing here is no supplies, no equipment, no student transportation. Instead, IEP-driven transportation should be coded to a program in the 2000 series with a function code in the 2700 series. This will be picked up in the transportation allocation line. So a lot of times we have questions about, well, I have to take my special ed kid somewhere, to a school. Transportation, right? I heard that from someone a long time ago.
Transportation's transportation.
Right, so even though the kid is special ed, the expenditure is really all about the transportation, not the special ed. So I just wanted to put that in there a little bit. Revenues considered in the special education calculation. So all the general fund, state and local only, are considered. Revenues other than main care, tuition, miscellaneous revenue from other SAUs, miscellaneous sales, prior year refunds, state agency clients, and foster care receipts.
Potomac Valley bus dismissal.
So those are not, so those particular ones are not yours. So all of the others would be, all of the other revenue that pertains would be. Main care revenue and main care transfers. They're considered because if you have an expenditure and somebody reimburses you for that expenditure, you kind of don't have that expenditure anymore, right? So you can't, claim the expenditure and claim the revenue, and it needs to make sense that you're not doubling, you're not doubling. For purposes of the special ed formula and MOE, component 6, the general fund special ed revenues are netted out of the special ed expenditures. Special education allocation, component 6, maintenance of effort. This one might go along. Maintenance of effort. The federal government wants to make sure SAUs are not spending less state and local dollars than they had in the previous year on special ed students. To assist in meeting this federal requirement, we compare special ed formula amounts, components 1 through 4, to prior year net general fund special ed expenditures. Where we do this comparison, we also remove a high-cost out-of-district allocation from the expenditures. We do this because we have accounted for the general fund expenditures amounts above the threshold in the high-cost out-of-district line, 79, and do not want to account for these funds again. Tuition and board expenditures below the threshold amounts are still in the maintenance and other check. This is how this calculates for all stars. Sports components, base prevalence, size, and high cost in district are the formula amount of 369 net special ed expenditures for prior year was 180,000. High cost out of district allocation, 27,300. Net special ed expenditures, so 480,000 subtracted 27 brings us to 452,693.70. Prior year special ed count equals 42. Prior year pupil special ed expenditures which is the 452 divided by 42 equals the 10,778. Does that make sense? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Current year special ed count is 38. MOE check is the lesser of prior year per pupil special ed expenditure times current year pupil or net special ed expenditures. The adjustment is the difference between the MOE check and formula amount. If the difference is negative, the adjustment is a 0. Follow that? I'm not sure I really put that out there the way that I would have put it. Did everybody kind of follow that? Yeah? Okay, great. ED 279, Section 3A2, Special Ed Allocation is a formula 69,516 plus MOE adjustment amount of the 40, which equals the allocation of 409,580. Sections 3A3, high cost out of district, special education allocation was 27,306. Total special education allocation was 436,886. Prior year, net special ed expenditures, 480. This makes sense since they dropped by 4 students. 38 current special ed students and prior year, 42. And their prior per pupil special ed expenditures were 10,778. 4 times the 10,778 equals the 43,111. Costs associated to the drop in students was 43,113 plus the total special ed allocation, which brings your total to the 480. Okay, so we're jumping a little to something really odd, right? Now we're all of a sudden talking main care, right? Ida and I talked about where this should fit in here, and I think it resulted here before we move on to the next piece, because some of what is in here pertains to that next piece. So she felt like it fit here pretty good. So just quickly, main care C. Main care C is an expenditure for special ed. So last year we did a lot of work with making sure folks were accounting for their seed and also accounting for their subsidy that was paying that seed. So I know last year I worked with probably half of the state, really, to try to zone in on that. So it is an expenditure. You want those numbers in your books. Main care seed is assessed when a medical service, often referred to as a related service, is provided in accordance with an IEP. DOE upfront funds to main care to cover all anticipated seed costs for all SAUs for a fiscal year. DOE determines SAU responsibility and recovers those funds from the SAUs quarterly. A cumulative total is shown on 8279 for the to identify these expenditures. Please review the accounting instructions for the process to account for main care seed expense and subsidy used to pay for it. Intricate new main care policy to be observant of. So recently, there was a main care DOE combined boot camp. I don't know if anybody attended or, but there's a lot of new things going on with main care. A lot of opportunities for building main care that we haven't really talked about in the past, so I'm not going to talk about them today. I just want to point to them. If you have an interest, please go check it out. There's a lot of good information in the DHS's main care education webpage. Training as well. So if you have an interest, or you think someone in your SAU has an interest or should look at these things, please, by all means, spread the word. Revenue. So eventually there's going to be like two different types of main care revenue. One, the type that is driven by an IEP, and that one will always have seed. And that one, the revenue code is 4585. Probably everybody is very comfortable with that. At some point in the future, there will be main care billing for non-IEP related, non-IEP related medical services through health centers or health clinics, and there is no seed on those services. But the revenue coming through is very much going to need to be identified as non-special ed, right? Because if you throw everything into one pot, then your numbers are going to be sloppy. So it's going to be really important to code IEP services to 4585 and non-IEP services to 4586. It's not in the book yet. I don't even know that we've spread the word yet necessarily, maybe through a few, but this will be coming. It's not actually happening right now.
Look at us being prepared ahead.
I mean, someday we'll be proactive instead of firemen. Okay, and this slide I don't want me to run through because this is the slide that she presented at this boot camp. Okay? People wanted to know, if I go main care, how does that revenue interact with the funding formula? So IDA says if the main care revenue is for claims for school health related services, non-IEP, coded to revenue code 4586, then there is no impact to EPS. This is non-IEP services. Because the special education allocation has both state and local share, and SAU's main care revenue for services in accordance with an IEP for main care eligible members is subtracted from the special ed expenditures, as this is special education tuition revenue. This mitigates additional tax burden by accounting for funds already received. The main care special ed service revenue is coded to 4585. Basically, they're saying, you know, if you're billing main care pays you for that expenditure, it's not there anymore, right? So we're not going to use that expenditure again when we're trying to calculate MOE, because somebody already paid you for it. It's really, I mean, it's on your books, but it's really not expenditure anymore because you're paid for it. Does that make sense? Okay, number 2, if we start receiving main care reimbursement, are there restrictions regarding EPS as to how that money is used? The answer is no. The EPS formula does not dictate how an SAU would utilize main care reimbursement. Any funding available to support admin costs for billing main care. Special Education Administration in the Special Ed formula would be under Fund 1000, Program 2500, Function 2330, and would include salary and benefits for directors, assistant directors, regular employees, temporary employees, stipends, in addition to employee professional development, contract services, and legal. So there is something in the formula for admin. It's not its own line, but it's in it. Why bill main care? Well, the federal government will pay approximately 62% of the cost, meaning there's less tax burden on the local taxpayers. Also, these funds are reimbursed faster than what occurs in the funding formula. So, have we missed anything? Anything about special ed that I didn't touch upon that should? Wow, I was really good.
Maybe this is a good time for you to talk about what we know is broken.
Okay, let me ask one more thing.
Sure.
Okay, so it was great to see Tyler and our HR here today. One of the things it brought up for me was soon we'll be talking with the controllers office about P100. We're going to meet with them. And over the years, I've always known P100 to be something that just assists the auditors. But I'm thinking that it's probably a little bit bigger and more than just the auditors that could benefit from maybe a better product. So I was talking with Hollis about the P100 to see if she uses it, and she said she absolutely does use it. So if you use it and you think, I absolutely need this because it helps me so much, I think it would be a good idea if someone would, or people will just let me know their thoughts on it, if you have thoughts about it. Why is it so important to you? What do you look for when you look at the P100 versus what our HR might look for? So if you're interested in giving me some of your words, just so that when we go into a meeting, I have something from maybe both sides of the fence, and maybe get a better product at the end of the day. Discussion about the need for more detail.
Great to see detailed paint.
Yes.
Vermont actually lists individual payments.
We have to talk about the people downstairs, really. But over the years, I think we've discovered that we need to have a better product. And especially as it's being used more and more and more with all the COVID money, all the extra federal funds. So it is a nice way to, it's not 100%, but it's a nice way to look and go, oh, I forgot about that CFDA number, whatever. So if you could, or would or could, put some communication to me about how you feel about 100 and what would make it better for you, we will definitely try to do something about that. The last thing I wanted to say was thank you, because I thought I was going to fall apart up here. And I didn't, so, well, let me
Do you want to tell them who to contact for convention?
Well,
That's an IDO word, by the way.
That's funny, because I thought that was a typo. It's not. It's an IDO word.
It's Yiddish.
She asked my permission to leave it in there, and I said yes. Certainly contact me for any convention. So, thank you, Denise, that was awesome. I know this was not yours, so you did a great job. Thank you all for your patience. It was a lot of information, but I hope that some of you got a better grasp on maybe specifically special ed, high cost out of district, and those expenditure-driven components of the formula, because it's very important. That being said, there are parts of it that are broken. This formula, well, it's almost 20 years old. Some of it has been updated regularly, some of it hasn't. Some of it needs fixing, and we're working on it. So, for instance, the high cost in district, it was too burdensome to get the information that was required for how that was written.
So that has just simply been a inflation factor increase over the years. We're looking into what might be better for that. The other piece of it that we realize is broken is 15%. 15% is no longer the average special ed identification in the state of Maine. So we know that that also needs to be considered. And then thirdly, the high cost out of district. And the desire to incentivize more in-district or regional programs. So we're researching it, we've got Macquarie working on research, we're trying to figure out a better way. In the meantime, we're just making doing the best we can, and trying to give you the best and the most that we can give you based on the current formula that's in section. So just work with us, give us your ideas, and we're gonna try to get something done, I promise you, because we're partners. So that was all I wanted to say.
Of course not. So someone had mentioned chart accounts, so I do want to touch on it because I forgot to. So on our webpage, DOE funding training, there's a section for chart of accounts. These chart of accounts are really just for like an example to show you kind of like how you would code so-and-so and so-and-so. Coding is, it's not necessarily wrong if you code it one way versus another way, but it could affect your finances if you code it one way versus another way. And I'll give you a really quick example. I had someone say to me, well, I wanna code my related services. I have a kiddo getting related services in the summertime, so I wanna use 4300. And you certainly can, right? I'm not gonna tell you you can't, but wouldn't it be more beneficial if you use special ed program, because it really is a special ed situation? And if you code it to summer school, it's not gonna get picked up in special ed. So when your maintenance and efforts is being determined, those expenditures are not there. Like I said, it doesn't mean that you are coding it wrong. It just means that there could possibly be a better way to code it. So the chart of accounts is a really nice visual for folks, especially new folks coming in, because it gives you ideas. It's not solid. Everything does not get coded to 1,000. I can promise you that. But it just gives you an idea, okay? And they haven't been updated in a long while. Eventually, we're going to be proactive, and eventually, we'll have enough staff to get motivated. We need to put some new, but the gist. And if you see, you'll see it's literally by category. So that's what I like the most. I can just click into special ed and kind of view what the coding should be, and then if I'm using IDA, then I would use a different fund code. You know, so there are areas where you have to make a decision, but the chart accounts is really nice to use as a little guide. Any questions?
So on the P100, I think, at least for me, no different than our HR Smith. The auditors are asking us to reconcile it. The auditors say it's our responsibility to reconcile it, no disagreement. It's hard for us to reconcile it when we don't have detail to the P100, because if there's a discrepancy, for example, the P100 DAX issues a check on June 29th. We don't deposit that check till July 5th. In the P100, it's in June. For us, we haven't recorded it on a cash basis till July. We may record a receivable, but we haven't recorded it, so that reconciliation without the detail becomes very problematic at times, especially if we've miscoded in our general ledger a payment in the wrong account, and then it's almost impossible. So that level of detail, much like you said, Vermont, would be really helpful.
And so I agree. One of the other things that someone had said to me is, you know, if you're working within Grants for Me, that information kind of is at your fingertips. Like, I've never worked in it, but I'm assuming a grant system is going to have a place that you can go and see when things were done, right? You won't see when the check was, well, maybe you will see when the check was cut, but you don't see when you.
Just
data.
system
No, I mean like when you send in an invoice, you don't see the date. But you see, but when it's cut, you don't see that. Okay, okay, so that is a big deal. That is a big deal, because you're not seeing the final, the full effect, you're only seeing when you did it, not when it.
It's almost like food service. Food service lists every single payment under each of those 8 or 10 categories, whether it's federal, state match, breakfast, school snack. It lists, and it lists each check and each date and each month of what the payment was, which allows us, if we mispost something, to say, okay, we can go back and find it and we can match those totals up. If the P100 was structured the same way, in my opinion, others may feel differently, that allows us a better opportunity and a more efficient opportunity to find those differences.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that if we need more detail, then we should get with the controller's office and talk about that, because if the tool's not good, it's not good, right? It's not gonna help you if it doesn't give you everything you need. So we'll work on that, for
And
sure.
who should we reach out to if we have questions on, for instance, we're going through one now where our superintendent wants to see it a different way than how the account coding is currently structured. I won't get into specifics, we can talk separately, but if that discrepancy comes in, who do we talk to? Is it Paula, is it you, is it
No,
Ida?
if it's related to the P100,
Related to just account coding?
account coding would be me.
Just so people know if they have a similar question, we're going to the right person.
Account coding, budgets, main care, audits, that's me.
Okay.
Okay, so if you need anything in that area, please let me know. Also, I'm just gonna put myself out here. If you're new, even if you're not new, but if you're new and you are struggling with the handbook, please contact me and schedule a time so we can have a 20-minute, half an hour conversation. I think the more you use your handbook, the more comfortable you're gonna be with it. Mine is there every day, I open it every day, I'm writing in it every single day. I almost feel like you guys almost should be at least once a week, I think. Because we always have something going on, right? We always have the new literacy codes. We always have new stuff coming and going. So get familiar with your handbook, because the more familiar you are with that, the easier your job's gonna be. So I'm gonna close with that unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Did it, Joanne?
Excuse me? You think? On Sunday?
Denise, can I ask you a question? We have a new construction project.
Put in a request for cushions.
I know.